Testing, testing.
Hi, Commissioner Barve. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I didn't hear Fred when he spoke there a second ago.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Okay. All right, ready? Okay, welcome to the Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for December 11th, 2024. First item is our minutes from the meeting of December 4th, 2024. Commissioner Sushman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barve.
Aye.
I vote aye.
On today's agenda, we have 7 items, but we will be deferring items 3, 4, and 5 to a future administrative meeting. So the first item on today's agenda is from Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. It's request for a CPCN waiver relating to the Amtrak Central Tunnel relocation work in Baltimore.
Good morning, Chair Hoover and Commissioners. Lord Rawson presenting this item on behalf of staff. I beg your indulgence. This presentation is necessarily, I believe, a little bit long. So on November...
Could you bring your microphone a little closer?
Okay, is that a little better?
Great.
Okay. So on November 7th, 2024, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, BGE, filed a written request under Public Utilities Article 7, Section 7-202B, 3 Romanet 2, for a good cause waiver of the requirement that it obtain a CPCN to remove 2 transmission circuits in BGE's Center Transmission Tunnel, the CTT, which runs through Amtrak's BNP tunnel, and relocate them to new overhead transmission towers. BGE explains that it must relocate these transmission circuits because Amtrak has notified BGE that starting in February 2026, Amtrak is going to demolish and replace the problematic BNP tunnel with the new Frederick Douglass tunnel as part of its federally ordered high priority and important Northeast Corridor improvement project. BGE is contractually required to comply with Amtrak's request, but BGE recognizes that simply retiring the circuits in the CTT is not acceptable because doing so would put the community and a significant number of essential entities at risk of having no grid-supplied electricity in the event of an outage. In addition, retiring those circuits would, without replacing them, would overload 4 other circuits by 5 to 20% above their emergency ratings. Recognizing the need to relocate the transmission circuits that are currently in the CTT, BGE examined 6 alternatives and concluded that the project proposed in the instant application, which we refer to as the CTT relocation project, is the least costly and easiest to construct. BGE needs to start construction on the overhead configuration of the proposed CTT relocation project as soon as possible in 2025 so that it can move its electric service onto those new overhead towers before Amtrak begins demolition of the BNP tunnel in early 2026. If BGE were required to obtain a CPCN for this project, which typically takes 12 to 18 months, BGE would not be able to relocate the circuits currently in the CTT before Amtrak begins its work to replace the BNP tunnel. Under Section 7-207B3, Section 7-207B3 Romanet 1 of the Public Utilities Article, BGE would normally need to obtain a CPCN to replace the circuits currently in the CTT with the overhead transmission lines described in the application. However, Section 7-207B3 Romanet 2 provides that for construction related to an existing overhead transmission line, the Commission may waive the CPCN requirement for good cause. After careful consideration of this provision, guided by applicable case law, staff has determined that BGE's proposed CTT relocation project qualifies for this waiver provision because it consists of construction related to existing overhead transmission lines. Staff has also determined that good cause exists to grant the requested CPCN waiver for the CTT relocation project for the following reasons. One, federal, state, and Amtrak funding is in place for Amtrak to design and begin construction on the important and high-profile Frederick Douglass Tunnel project. Two, BGE is contractually required to remove its facilities from Amtrak's right-of-way upon request. Three, the circuits in the CTT need to be relocated rather than retired because retiring those circuits would unacceptably put the community and essential entities at risk of having no grid-supplied electricity in the event of an outage. Retiring those circuits rather than replacing them would also significantly overload 4 other circuits. 4, given Amtrak's project schedule, if BGE were required to obtain a CPCN for this project, BGE would not be able to relocate the circuits currently in the CTT before Amtrak begins its work to replace the BNP tunnel. 5, BGE has provided in its waiver request much of the information that would be required for a full CPCN application. For these reasons, staff has determined that good cause exists to grant BGE the requested CPCN waiver. As an alternative to granting a CPCN waiver, the Commission might choose to permit BGE's CTT relocation project to move forward without a CPCN under 49 U.S. Code Section 24902J, a federal preemption statute that specifically addresses work undertaken in furtherance of the Northeast Corridor Improvement Program and Amtrak's operation of rail services between the District of Columbia and Boston. Staff concludes, however, that it would be preferable for the Commission to grant a CPCN waiver for the CTT relocation project rather than relying on federal preemption, because granting a CPCN waiver would enable the Commission to impose conditions on the project if it so chooses. Staff also notes that if the Commission declines to grant a waiver for the proposed CTT relocation project, Amtrak might invoke this provision. So in conclusion, staff recommends that the Commission grant BGE's request for a discretionary waiver for good cause under Section 7-207B3 Romanet 2 of the Public Utilities Article of the requirement that BGE obtain a CPCN to relocate the circuits in the CTT by constructing overhead transmission lines to replace them as described in the instant request, subject to conditions proposed by the Commission, the Power Plant Research Program, and or other applicable government entities. And I, and more importantly, Assistant Staff Counsel Jennifer Purvis, are here to answer any questions.
So, any questions for staff? Commissioner Sussman?
This may be a question that's more appropriately answered by BGE, but I'm in reviewing the application from the applicant, is the capacity of the lines the same? So what's going to be overhead is going to be able to carry the same amount of electricity as the current lines?
I believe we addressed it in here somewhere, and I don't remember off the top of my head.
So what is the voltage of the lines?
115 kV.
Okay, so they're
circuits.
115 kV, that current current lines are 115 kV,
Yeah,
and the replacement would be 115
Wha-
kV.
correct.
And was there any consideration of enhancing the capacity of the lines or increasing the efficiency of the lines to allow for additional electricity to go across those lines?
Okay,
So-
I don't think I asked about the capacity, but I did ask the company about its 10-year plan and whether they would, whether they can provide any assurance that they would need to, once they do this project, would you need to come back within the next 10 years to redo it? And the answer was no.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I guess the other question, though, would be, as long as you're doing it, are there opportunities to gain efficiencies by increasing the capacity of the wires to locate some other advanced transmission technologies like storage? I mean, was there any consideration, as long as you're doing the work, of addressing perhaps constraints on other aspects of the grid to accommodate those issues? Or was this simply just looking at the current capacity and then just sort of replacing it with overhead
Yeah.
lines?
So my main concern was that once you do this project, you don't need to come back in 10 years and redo it. So, and the answer was, yeah, once this project is completed, BG has no plans to upgrade it in the next 10 years, the overhead segment that is the subject of this waiver request.
Yeah, I guess the other question, though, is, I mean, it may not be that they would come here and do anything on the lines that they're replacing, but perhaps they would need to go and replace other lines because they didn't do things that they could have done now.
Yeah,
I mean, my thinking is, as long as they're doing the work, if there are opportunities to gain efficiencies, why wouldn't you take advantage of those now? And was that something that I mean, that would be something perhaps that would come out in a CPCN process, and I don't want to lose the opportunity to consider those by simply granting the waiver. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Could I add just one consideration?
Please.
Is that if they were to do significant change or make significant changes, I think, in the capacity of those lines, it more likely would require a CPCN, and we wouldn't be able to use the waiver provision.
No, I understand. My question was that a consideration? Was that a request from the utility? I mean, I understand the need to get this project built, so I understand the timing issue, but I'm also aware that this is an opportunity if they're doing a project, and if there are efficiencies that can be gained by installing some other advanced technology, we probably want to take advantage of that.
yeah. From the response here, I am thinking that, they're looking at that area of the grid, and they don't have a plan to upgrade. They won't need to upgrade those lines within the next year to.
But they will have to upgrade some lines somewhere, and I guess the question is,
Yeah.
could they avoid having to do that by doing something on this? And I guess that wasn't asked, and they didn't. Okay, all right. I'm going to be asking the company that one.
Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner Barbe.
Yeah, thank you. The one thing I noticed and I'm curious about, in the data response section, it was said that this project was not a part of BG&E's forecasted electric demand plan. But they appear to say that this is going to have a big effect on their 10-year plan. I guess what I don't understand, and maybe I misheard your response to Commissioner Suchman, is this a large increase in their load and their demand, or is it something that's low low enough that it can be accommodated by what their plans are? I guess I'm just not understanding whether or not this is a big or a little thing for us to be concerned about.
No, so it's not to meet any demand. It's they simply can't retire the circuits. It's not to meet any new demand. They need to keep those circuits in place to serve the existing load. And
Okay, so basically,
Yeah.
although it's not a part of their forecasted electric demand, it's not going to change that much because it's a replacement. Is that essentially what you're saying?
I think I missed a few words of your question, but if I can repeat.
Okay, so basically, although it is not a part of their forecasted electric demand plan, it's not a big change, so that they can accommodate this without having much of an impact on their 10-year plan. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I'm saying that they need to keep these lines in service by moving them to new towers in order to satisfy their existing load. And they would not need to do anything, any more upgrades on those lines within the next 10 years to meet their existing load or planned load, existing and planned for the next 10 years.
Okay, I think I have my answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so actually, before I turn to you, power plant research program, you signed off on this, and you don't have any conditions, correct?
Morning, Chair Hoover and Commissioners. Steve Tolson. And what I have with me this morning, Fred Kelly from PPRP. That's correct. We filed a letter last Friday on the 6th stating that we don't oppose the granting of a waiver, but PPRP won't be submitting conditions because their authorizing statute to do that requires that it be attached to a CPCN.
Okay. All right, so, so wait a minute. Got one question, so.
So in reviewing the proposal, did you think about or consider sort of lost opportunities? They're sort of putting in new overhead lines, and so there are things that can be done on those lines to address constraints, to enhance efficiencies. Did you consider sort of? I mean, I understand that they need to do this, but did you also consider that there could be lost opportunities by granting the waiver without putting any conditions on?
I don't believe that PPRP engaged in that level of analysis. That would have probably required them to use their contractors to do that. And since
Okay.
this wasn't seen as a CPCN, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, Fred? Assistant Director Fred Kelly, PPRP.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioners. No, given the limited scope of what was being posed here, and understanding that it seemed to us to be a one-to-one, they need to move the buried line, and then the best alternative looked to be this short overhead span, and given their review of the letter request, it looked like they were addressing all of the environmental and socioeconomic issues that we would normally take on. And it seemed like as long as they followed through and gotten the appropriate permits in that line, we were fine with it.
Okay, but before you leave, but and do you know how long this line is?
It looked like about a quarter mile. Maybe BGE could speak to that more or less. But
Okay.
yeah, we didn't do as Mr. Towson said, we didn't do a deep dive in terms
Okay,
of.
and it may be that this is a project that is appropriate to grant a waiver, but I guess the concern I have is I don't want the waiver process to take from us the ability to identify additions to a project that can enhance the value of the line. And so, even if it's a quarter of a mile, there may be opportunities that are lost because we're not really sort of looking at the project as a whole, and a project as a whole in terms of the planning of the company. So, you keep sort of taking little pieces, and then all of a sudden you've got an exception that's swallowing up the rule.
Yeah,
So-
no, I agree on that intent, but maybe the company would be best to respond in terms
Okay,
of the
thank you.
funding.
Commissioner Barve, do you have a question or?
Me? No.
Okay, because your little hand thing's up, so
I.
that's fine. No, you're front. You're
Me. Oh, well.
no, we're good.
Thank you.
So, BG&E.
Good morning, Commissioners. Joel Michelle on behalf of BG. First, I'd like to, and this can't be overstated, thank staff for their thorough analysis. Mr. Alston and staff attorneys in reviewing their buck sheet, I think they've done most of my work for me. But I would simply just add in response to staff's questions to Commissioner Suchman's questions, yes, we have, in fact, used this opportunity to increase the efficiency of those lines. Specifically, although the voltage will remain the same, the existing lines will be replaced with higher capacity lines to address Commissioner Suchman's concern. And then to add to staff's response to Commissioner Barve's question, this work is relatively small and significant compared to a normal CPCN project. As Mr. Alston stated, it is not work that BGE has determined on its own is needed to address future demand. It's a somewhat unique situation where we have been in Amtrak's right-of-way pursuant to an agreement, and Amtrak, because of the new tunnel that it's in the process of building, has asked us to vacate essentially their property. So that is the need for this particular work. And again, to reemphasize, it is a relocation of existing lines as opposed to new lines to meet new expected demand. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, Commissioner Suchman.
Yeah. So, and actually, I appreciate the additional information about what you've done to try to improve the efficiency of and the capacity of the lines. So that's a good thing. And I think that and I understand the importance of this, and so I understand that this is unique. But I think my point is that I just, anytime the utility does something involving transmission, because of the current state of the system and the availability of advanced transmission technologies. I just want to make sure that the company is considering that, and it doesn't have to be within the context of a CPCN, but it's good to know that you are sort of thinking about this. And I also think it's important to emphasize that the waiver should only be requested under extraordinary circumstances, and this I think may sort of fit that definition. But that for the project generally, it needs to follow a CPCN for the reasons that we've talked about in past proceedings. So thank you.
Okay, so one question for staff. PPRP said they didn't have any conditions. You don't have any conditions either for this.
Actually, I was thinking about it this morning as I was looking over, and I do have a couple of conditions that are normal conditions we place in these CPCNs.
Okay,
The first one was BGE notifies the commission when the reconfigured circuits have been placed into service. And then the second one would be BGE files the as-built cost of the reconfigured circuits and provides justification for any significant change from the $28 million cost estimate provided in its CPCN waiver request.
and
No
you're-
objections.
You're fine with that?
No objections.
Okay, all right. So with that, I move we grant the company's request for a discretionary waiver for good cause under Public Utilities Article 7-207B3I, double I, of the requirement that the company obtain a CPCN to relocate the circuits in the central transmission tunnel by constructing overhead transmission lines to replace them as described in the application and subject to the conditions proposed by commission staff. Commissioner Sushman.
Aye.
Commissioner Barbe.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Thank you very much.
Item number 2 is a request from Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, Inc.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Eric Delgado on behalf of staff. I also have with me DeAndre Wilson from the Engineering Division. On October 16th, 2024, the Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, SMECO, filed a request pursuant to Code of Maryland Regulations, COMAR, Section 2050-0405, for authorization to retroactively bill its customer, KMC Thermal, LLC, for undercharges that have occurred for more than 12 months. SMECO determined that the customer has been undercharged for its usage since October 5th, 2022, and calculated the total undercharge amount to be $158,444.62 for the period beginning on October 5th, 2022 through July 31st, 2024. SMECO has already billed KMC for the unbilled period from August 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2024. Since the undercharges have occurred for more than 12 months but fewer than 3 years, SMECO requires Commission approval before it can retroactively bill its customer for the undercharges occurring from October 5th, 2022 through July 2023. SMECO calculated that the undercharge amount for this period is $59,256.81. Staff notes the customer was undercharged due to a C-phase fault in the current transformer connected to a meter circuit owned by the Potomac Electric Power Company, PEPCO. SMECO has a meter in line with PEPCO's meter circuit to capture the customer's usage. The customer, KMC, owns and operates the Brandywine Power Plant located in Prince George's County, Maryland, in SMECO's service territory. KMC has an interconnection agreement with PEPCO and is only considered a SMECO customer when the power plant is idle or not generating power. The generating plant is not connected to SMECO's distribution lines, but are instead directly connected to PEPCO's bulk transmission lines that run through SMECO's service territory. Given the arrangement, SMECO does not own the current transformer in question and was unaware of the issue until August 2024, when a PEPCO employee informed SMECO's Meter and Operations Director that a PEPCO current transformer was faulty. Originally, the customer contacted PEPCO about the faulty current transformer in October 2022. The customer states that the out meter readings of the current transformer appeared low. Upon investigation, PEPCO's relay group confirmed that the transformer was faulty, but mistakenly identified the faulty current transformer as customer owned. The faulty current transformer remained disregarded until the customer re-identified the issue to PEPCO in August 2024. Staff concludes that the undercharges that have transpired for a prolonged period of time is due to miscommunication. Staff notes that the COMAR regulations provide that a utility may request authorization to retroactively bill its customer for undercharges that have occurred for more than 12 months if the customer knew or could have reasonably known that the bills were in error. It is staff's view that the customer took the appropriate action by informing PEPCO of the issue, since PEPCO owns the current transformer. Since KMC does not own and maintain the current transformer in question, it is not reasonable to conclude that the customer should have known that the bills were in error. Staff recommends that the Commission deny SMECO's request to retroactively bill KMC for the undercharges that have occurred for more than 12 months in the amount of $59,256.81. Additionally, staff recommends that PEPCO promptly repair or replaces KMC's three-phase current transformer. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
So, any questions for staff?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Mark McDougall on behalf of SMECO. The regulatory standard in this matter is straightforward. COMAR 2050-04-05 states that the utility may seek authorization for undercharges occurring more than 12 months up to 3 years if the customer knew or should have known the bills were in error. Here, in this case, KMC absolutely knew or should have known the bills were in error. Staff explained the setup at KMC's generating plant. There are 3 current transformers that allow energy meters to accurately measure electrical current flow and monitor energy consumption at the facility. And staff accurately stated in his comments that failure of the C phase of the 3-phase current transformer would directly affect the energy produced and consumed by KMC and lead to inaccurate meter readings. KMC knew this. In fact, in its comments in this matter filed with the Commission, it was said that in October 2022, KMC noted that the out-meter electrical readings were low. And then KMC also in 2022 notified PEPCO that a current transformer had failed. Now, staff has said that these current transformers allow the energy meters to accurately reflect consumption. KMC is not a residential customer. KMC is a sophisticated generating plant owner. And as such, it knew that this current transformer had failed. In fact, it notified PEPCO as such, and that the meter readings were low. And we know that the current transformer has not been fixed or replaced for the entire period. That knowledge meets the COMAR standard. For various reasons that I don't understand, staff chalks this up to miscommunication among KMC, PEPCO, and SMECO. Well, that doesn't matter. And even if there was miscommunication, it wasn't on SMECO's part. The only miscommunication that I've been able to discern from all the paperwork that's been filed with the Commission is that KMC reported to PEPCO about its current transformer being out, and then PEPCO's saying that it wasn't theirs, it was the customer's. That's the miscommunication. I believe that's been resolved at this point. But I contend there was no miscommunication by or to SMECO. But that is not the COMAR standard. The COMAR standard is whether KMC, the customer, knew or should have known that the readings were incorrect. And they were. So SMECO renews its request for authorization to bill KMC for the undercharges for the period occurring after 12 months and up to 3 years since the incorrect billing was discovered.
So, actually, do the staff have a response to what Smeko just said, or?
I would just say that in KMC's comments, they reported that the out meter reading appeared abnormal, but didn't find that the in meter readings, which I'm assuming captures the usage of the plant, to be normal. So with that, I stand by that the customer didn't know, and since they don't own the equipment, that they shouldn't be on the hook for the undercharges.
Commissioner Fleshman.
So KMC is a customer of SMECO and has been a customer of SMECO for how long?
Oh my goodness, I don't know for how long. I have someone in the behind me who could answer that question.
Yes, please.
Since 1996, I'm told.
Okay, so a long time, and they've been getting bills
That's correct.
every month. And are you is there, is KMC in the room? Yes,
Oh,
please. And maybe you can answer the question, but you'll have to come up to the podium.
just introduce yourself and kind of identify who you're with.
My name's Jerry Ramsey. I'm here for KMC Thermo and Onward Energy. I'm the plant manager of the plant. I'm new in the role since September of
Okay.
this year. I'm by myself.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Ramsey, in your capacity, do you see the bills every month? The electric bills that come in?
The billing has changed since this event,
Okay.
where now, I can't remember if it's August, September, we no longer get billed the same way.
Okay. So, well, then maybe nobody can answer this question. I guess my question is, so KMC would get a bill from SMECO of an amount, and it was a total amount, or was the bill sort of allocated to different
Yes.
aspects of the company?
We get, now we get 2 bills.
Right, so I'm talking about at the time.
Yeah, I think we got 3 bills at that time. I've not been involved with the company in that aspect.
Okay, and do you know what the 3 bills represented?
We have an area that's the warehouse area that gets 1 bill that has another building attached, and then the power plant, when we're offline and draw, had an independent bill at that time.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about, that particular bill. Okay. And when the bill was received every month, was there a moment where the person who was receiving the bill said, "This bill doesn't make any sense"?
Yes, all I can go by is based similar on what was already said, that the on-site staff notified PEPCO that something was not right. PEPCO came and investigated and found that the C phase failed.
Okay.
That's all I.
Okay, so when the bills were being received every month, you knew that the bill was too low, the KMC.
I don't know. I believe so. And
Okay.
That's why they were notified that something did not seem right.
Okay, and then how? So for what period was the bill too low?
I believe they're saying from October 2022 to August of 24, and of that 159,000 that they talked about already, KMC's already agreed to pay 100,000 of it.
Okay, so once the transformer's not been replaced, so there's still.
Currently, they still have not been replaced.
Okay, so the bill's still too low.
We are no longer being billed for that.
Okay, and that stopped when?
I believe in August or September. I do not know.
Okay, but until you stopped being billed for that, KMC was aware that the bill was still too low because of the problem with the transformer.
Yes.
Okay. All right. It just seems to me that being aware that the bill was too low, you're kind of on notice that you're going to be owing more than what you're being billed, and so then there's just a question of determining what that amount is. Even if you are sort of notifying PEPCO and notifying everybody that there's a problem with the bill, it doesn't seem like that sort of absolves you, the KMC, of still being obligated to pay the bill. So I guess maybe staff, they knew that they owed more than what they were being billed. So I guess I'm not understanding why they're going to get a $59,000 discount just because they made phone calls. I mean, maybe you, Mr. Ramsey, you can answer that question.
So in saying that we knew we were being billed, it's sort of maybe not that black and white, because it's based on generation out, generation in, and different things. So we went under the assumption we were being underbilled, but we had no way of knowing the dollar amounts or anything.
Right, but would that have changed what you would have done. I mean, for example, if you knew that you were being underbilled to the amount of $158,000, would you have done something differently at the company, knowing that what you're owed is that much?
We believe that we notified the owner, Pepco, of what was going on and what we saw. And so there was more than just, one communication.
No, but I'm asking, would you have done something differently at the company? Would you have disconnected certain things? Would you have done something that sort of would have put you in a better place, knowing how much you owed, or did it really not change the way that you did?
Yeah, it did not change the way
Okay.
we did this.
See, and it just seems to me that, that they were underbilled, and now it was sort of, they knew they were being underbilled, it was corrected, and I guess I'm not understanding why they shouldn't be paying the full amount. Maybe staff, you can.
I would just say that according to the letter filed by the customer, they objected to Smecco's request, saying that they didn't know, and now that they're stating that they were aware that they're underbilled. I think that differs from what they filed in their comments.
Okay, so now you think that they should just pay the full amount?
But as I said, I was not in this role.
Sure.
No, I
So
completely understand.
I have the same paperwork that they're reading from and that you have. I have limited knowledge outside of that.
No,
Our official response is that we didn't know, that I would agree that we were not aware.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that they should be paying what they owed.
Commissioner Barbe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm reading the buck sheet here, and I guess I'm not quite understanding.
Wait a minute, so you were kind of breaking up, so you probably need to repeat the substance of your question.
Oh. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm reading the buck sheet and I'm misunderstanding an aspect of it. So if staff is available, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that is, in the buck sheet, it uses as an example a 1/3 or 33% reduction in total energy. I'm wondering, the $59,000, what percentage of a reduction is that? Is it a third, or is it more or less than a third?
That would be a little less than the third, since they were still billed for fixed charges. So the remaining amount is just volumetric.
So the underbilling, roughly what percentage was it for them?
1/3, about 1/3.
So it was a 1/3 reduction.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, let me just be clear. The reason I'm asking this is that when I was a CFO, if my electric bill were a third lower, I would know that something was up unless we had like half our staff call out sick or something. So, okay, thank you for answering that question.
Okay. Actually, I have a question, but it's actually for Pepco. So there's two recommendations by staff. One dealing with the money, but there's a second one directing you to repair, replace this transformer. Is that okay with you, or
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers, appearing for Pepco. We can't opine on the first issue. On the second issue, we are in the process of either repairing or replacing the transformer.
All right. Well, I guess with that, I'm going to move that we allow Smecco's request to retroactively bill KMC Thermal LLC for the undercharges that occurred for more than the 12 months in the amount of $59,256.81, and direct Pepco to repair or replace, whichever is reasonable, the KMC Thermal LLC's three-phase current transformer. Commissioner Sushman?
Aye.
Commissioner Barbe?
Aye.
I vote aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, the next item is the request from RISA NRG Energy and Clean Choice Energy for clarification onto Senate Bill 1 issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I don't.
It's item 6, Commissioner.
Yeah, we deferred.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we deferred 4 and 5. So, or 3, 4, and 5. Yeah. So.
Good morning, Chair Hoover.
So we're at item 6. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Hoover, Commissioner Suchman, and Commissioner Barve, Ruthie Herman, here on behalf of staff. I plan to address issue 1, and my colleague and the monitor, Dave Hoppick, will address issue 2. Thank you.
Sure.
Staff disagrees with the supplier coalition. Staff concludes that SB1's price caps, and this is issue 1, SB1's price caps, codified under 7-510D and 7-604.2B of the Public Utilities Article, apply to perpetual contracts as well as month-to-month and automatically renewing contracts. There is no violation of Section 7 of SB1. There is no impairment of any presently existing obligation or contract right. Regarding automatically renewing contracts, a valid residential supply contract, which by its express terms automatically renews at some date after January 1, 2025, incorporates the price caps. John Deere Construction and Forestry Company versus Reliable Tractor, a 2008 Maryland decision, held that the 2 open-ended agreements, which were subject to termination by either party with 120 days notice, were renewed following the enactment of Section 19-103 of the Commercial Law Article. Because that law was in effect at the time of the renewal, the law was incorporated into the agreements in accordance with Maryland law. I'd like to read directly from the Deere opinion. The law that was in effect at the time of the renewal was incorporated into the agreements in accordance with Maryland law. The Deere opinion also determined that the statute had not been applied retroactively, but prospectively. Deere has been quoted by the Fourth Circuit in Lyons versus PNC Bank. I'd like to read from the opinion. Laws subsisting at the time of the making of a contract enter into and form a part thereof, as if expressly referred to or incorporated in its terms. Regarding month-to-month contracts, staff relies on North Shore Cycles versus Yamaha Motor Corporation, a Fifth Circuit opinion quoted by Deere, the Maryland case, to demonstrate the uniformity of opinion, and allows us to logically conclude that an enforceable residential supply contract that provides a month-to-month duration term is also subject to SB1's price caps at the time of renewal anytime after January 1, 2025. North Shore Cycles determined that a month-to-month contract automatically renews each month until canceled by either party. North Shore Cycles determined that at the time of renewal, the contract is subject to the new law. And the last topic in issue 1 is perpetual contracts, or contracts with no expiration date, with a variable price term. Staff has concluded that those are also subject to the SB1 price caps. A perpetual contract with a residential customer with a variable price is simply an agreement to make an agreement at a future date. The material terms of a residential retail supply contract are price, quantity, and time or duration. These perpetual supply contracts with variable rates have no expiration date, so they have no express time term. They have no express price term because they are variable rates. And they have no express quantity term. A residential contract, a usage could be vary month to month. However, once a party provides one of the material terms, A contract is formed at that moment in time and only at that moment. So when a supplier fills in the variable rate, at that time, there is a contract. But when that happens after 1/1/2025, the agreement is subject to SB1's price caps. RISA concedes that either party can cancel at any time. If either party can cancel at any time, essentially, the variable price creates a new offer, one which either side can accept or reject. And again, an agreement to make an agreement at a future time is not an enforceable contract. We have a Maryland case, which I cite in our brief, Maslow versus Van Gorey. A contract is not enforceable unless it expresses with definiteness and certainty the nature and extent of the party's obligations and the essential terms of the agreement. Maslow relied on Mugavera versus Silverstein. An agreement that omits an important term is not enforceable. Maslow relied on Schloss v. Davis, a Maryland case. A contract may be so vague and uncertain as to price or amount as to be unenforceable. Maslow quotes Corbin on contracts and the restatement of contracts for support. From Corbin on contracts, vagueness of expression, indefiniteness, and uncertainty as to any of the essential terms of an agreement have often been held to prevent the creation of an enforceable contract. And Maslow, quoting the restatement, even though a manifestation of intention is intended to be understood as an offer, it cannot be accepted so as to form a contract unless the terms of the contract are reasonably certain. So in closing, on issue note 1, the staff recommends that if this body disagrees with staff and determines that an indefinite term variable rate contract is not subject to SB1's price caps, then staff recommends that the commission require the contractors, require the suppliers to send the customer a clear monthly notice of what their price will be in the month, and with the corresponding SOS price. Thank you very much.
So, any questions for staff? Commissioner Sussman.
And maybe this is more of an observation and not a question, but I mean, we kind of know what the legislature wanted us to do in SB1, and the concern I have is kind of gaming the process by identifying contracts that perhaps don't meet the clear definitions contained in the law, and I'm also concerned about that. That sort of knowing what they had in mind. I mean, they had in mind really trying to capture everything that was done before January 1st, 2025. And I am concerned about contracts that can be, argued to be, sort of grandfathered in that really were not the intention of the legislature. And so I'm also quite concerned about, to the extent we could draw a line, that would be the easiest thing. I understand that there are situations where the line is a little fuzzy, but I think that we need to err on the side of protecting consumers, and that was the whole point of SB1. So I guess it's probably more of an observation than a question. But if, Ms. Herman, if you have a response that.
Well, actually, before we turn to you, there's a number of folks that are kind of on the other side on this, so let me go through all of them, and then you can respond to everybody. So let me first go to OPC.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. We filed a letter on Monday echoing some of the remarks that staff has made today. We agree with staff's analysis that the application of the provisions of SB1 referenced in the Supplier Coalition's letter would not be prospective application in theory. We pointed out in our letter that we actually don't have an agreement, any of these purported agreements before us, so it is sort of difficult to understand, but what is being described appears to OPC to fit within the type of contracts at issue in the John Deere opinion that staff cited in its letter. So we would ask you to adopt staff's recommendation on that issue. I don't know if you want to move on to the second issue.
No, actually, let's deal with issue 1.
Okay.
So we'll have everybody talk about that, and then we'll move to 2.
Sure.
So any questions for OPC? Okay, so joint utilities.
Good morning again, Commissioners. Joel Michelle on behalf of the Joint Utilities. As we indicated in our comments, we are agnostic on this issue, but I do want to reiterate that the utilities do not have knowledge of the particular contracts between suppliers and customers, so would not be able to make the distinction of what is month to month and what is not.
Okay. And Maryland Energy Advocates Coalition. Whoever wants to speak for them. So.
Good morning, Chair Hoover and Commissioners. Laurel Peltier from the Maryland Energy Advocates Coalition. I think what was concerning these last 6 months, and our job is to represent the consumer, is that the reason we got into this $1.5 billion mess is because of month-to-month contracts and a liberal use of being able to, because the PSC never said they couldn't, start and stop and start and stop and start and stop and start a contract every single month for customers that were, once they signed that contract, they were never, ever talked to again, except for seeing it on their bill. So this contract was used by the industry, and it was clear to advocates that it allowed for variable rates, and the variable rates can be based on anything. It's clear in the contract. It can be based on anything. And then to have SB1, which was based on industry's continued and consistent practices after multiple years of being asked to discontinue these harmful financial practices, then to have SB1 come through and pretty clearly put a box around month-to-month contracts, variable rates, time lengths, so that you can have retail choice, so that it can work. And then to see all of a sudden contracts show up where simply it's as if a lawyer just took a Sharpie and just took out the month-to-month language. It was clear that industry knew that even the grandfathered month-to-month contracts were going to be renewed after January 1st. That's a month-to-month contract. And that this, I don't even know what you call it legally, would keep a very small number of contracts basically still grandfathered so that industry could charge very high rates. I just want to say there are still 280,000 accounts. There were only 2 suppliers that religiously used fixed rate contracts as when they sold it and as they renewed it. The majority of suppliers used month-to-month contracts, and that was their choice as a business. But now that you have a new law, from a consumer's point of view, we wholeheartedly agree with what staff said. We agree with OPC, and I think that at this point in our state, there should have been more good faith actions, and just seeing these contracts, which immediately were sent into PSC, it shows that the consumer is not the valued customer. The profits are. So I thank you for your time, but I strongly support, and so does MEAC, all the people, and quite frankly, the 200,000 customers that last year paid almost $200 million more for energy than a regulated utility. So this just has to stop. And I appreciate the commissioners leaning on the law and leaning on what consumers deserve after this mess for 14 years. Thanks.
So, anyone else on that side of the opinion? All right, with that, let me turn to the retail supply folks.
Good morning, Chairman Commissioners. Eric Wallace on behalf of the Supplier Coalition. In our comments on this perpetual contract issue, we laid out, our view and position on the issue that, SB1 includes language, grandfathering language that says it's not going to touch existing contracts that are in place before the start of next year. And we've got this issue that's come up is the difference between the term and the price, right? So these are contracts that have an indefinite term. The price fluctuates, but it's an indefinite term, right? And the language in SB1, appeared to focus on not the pricing structure, but the contract duration structure. And so we disagree with some of staff's conclusions about perpetual contracts in general. There's a body of case law, the Pumphrey v. Pelton case, that talks about where the Maryland then Court of Appeals recognized that perpetual contracts are valid in Maryland. But what we're really here asking the commission to do is to call the balls and strikes, to tell the supplier coalition members and the whole market what they need to be doing so that they're not out of compliance with SB1 in about 3 weeks. And if the commission's decision here is that these customers need to be dropped, the suppliers are going to have to process those drops with utilities, around Christmas for it to go through and those customers to be dropped by January 1st. So what we're really asking the commission is to tell the market what your expectation is with respect to these contracts. Staff also talked about month-to-month term contracts where they're renewing every month, and the commission addressed that in the ARM 78 proceeding. So our expectation is that those contracts are going to, need to comply with the law when they renew after January 1st, or be terminated. And one other consideration that I wanted to flag here is that, we're bumping up on the deadline here for, what could be, hundreds of potentially 100,000 or more contracts. I don't have all of the numbers. We represent a portion of the market, but we don't represent all of the suppliers. So I think what we're asking the commission to do is to provide the market the guidance on what the expectation is with respect to these contracts as we head into the new year, and then to issue a notice so that we'll certainly convey the commission's decision to our members, but also I think it's important that the other suppliers out in the market also get that direction so they know what the expectation is. We certainly don't want to get into a position next month where some of the confusion around some of the outstanding issues in terms of SB1 implementation leads to compliance enforcement activities that are not necessary if we can have a clear direction from the commission now of what the expectation is with respect to these contracts. So that was the reason why we filed these comments. We want to make sure that we have a clear understanding of the commission's view on this. As we laid out in our comments, our position is that the term, an indefinite term, is allowed under Maryland law, and that term is not renewing when the price may fluctuate. In ARM 54, the commission looked at variable pricing and put together some updates to the regs several years ago to require additional notices and to address some of the notice issues that had come out during the polar vortex period. But so our position is that it is the price may fluctuate, but the term has not renewed. We laid that out in our comments, but at the end of the day, what we're really asking the commission here is to give us the direction about what should be done going forward here to make sure we're properly implementing SB1.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Sussman?
Good morning, Mr. Wallace. And you may not know the answer to this. Ms. Peltier mentioned that there are about 280,000 of these contracts out.
There's about 280,000 residential customers on retail supply.
That's okay. So that's
So
my focus.
That's going to be fixed contracts, month-to-month variable term contracts.
This is all contracts. All contracts. 200. Okay. So of the 280,000, do you have a sense of how many are perpetual contracts? So see, how many sort of meet that definition of perpetual contracts, and then how many are the sort of month to month? Do you have a sense of how that breaks down?
I think Ms. Peltier had some comments on that from what she's seen anecdotally. In my experience, I've seen a lot more of the month to month term than I have the perpetual contracts, but
I
can't give you a
no. I
think it's a relatively small percentage of the 250,000.
I guess my question is, of the 280,000 contracts that we're talking about, how many contracts are we talking about in terms of the clarity that you're requesting today? How many of those contracts fit in those buckets?
I don't know for sure, but I think it is a small subset of the universe of residential
Okay,
contracts that are out
so
there today.
small being about, are we talking 20,000, 30,000?
I mean, I'll hazard a guess that it's less than 10% of the contracts, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. And
And it you know,
Ms. Peltier, is that your sense? Do you have a sense of the numbers or percentage?
Thank you. In looking at the types of contracts for every single company for tracking this for 8 years, I think about 120 to 140,000 max are fixed. And I would say it probably is on the low end. There are two companies, the number 1 and 2, well actually now number 1 and 5. Constellation and WGL have primarily fixed rate contracts. All of the others can offer fixed rate contracts, but the majority of them were sold in person, and that is done with month to month. Or a fixed rate, so a fixed rate generally came in on the line, and that's where most people got fixed rate contracts. There were some sold out there, but I would suspect that of the 280, 150,000 plus are month-to-month contracts.
Okay, so those would fit within the request that RISA has
Yeah.
made.
Perpetual, I mean, that's brand new.
Okay.
I just recently started, and not everybody used it. There were 2 large suppliers. I just noticed that the month-to-month verbiage was gone. So I would agree with Mr. Wallace that it is probably far less than 10%.
Okay. But would you agree with Ms. Peltier that the month-to-month could constitute about half of or more of the contracts that are out there?
it certainly could.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about today. So that is a big chunk. That's not 10%. That's a large.
We're talking about both, right? So
No, but I'm talking about the month-to-month. The clarity that you're requesting is for at least half of the contracts that are currently out there now.
No, the clarity that we're requesting is for the perpetual contracts that are that subset, right? So we're saying if you have I think it's important that the commission clarify both buckets so that, everyone's clear about what needs to happen here in the next 3 weeks. But the request that we made was when you have a perpetual term and coupled with a fluctuating rate, that we're looking at the term of the contract to determine the grandfathering. And I think that's a separate, smaller bucket than the world of contracts that have a month-to-month price, that may be, I think, largely coupled with a month-to-month term. It's where there's this disconnect, where the term and the price are not the same.
So let me just be, so now I'm a little confused. So today you're only asking for clarity on the perpetual contracts, no other contract, not the month-to-month, just the perpetual.
I think we would like the commission to provide clarity on both sets of contracts and tell the market what the expectation is.
What are you asking today?
The variable contracts with the month-to-month term, and also, the subset of those with month-to-month pricing, and the subset of those that have a perpetual term.
So you're asking for both. You're asking for the perpetual contract and also the month-to-month. And the month-to-month, I'm hearing, is at least half of all contracts that are.
It certainly could be in that neighborhood.
Okay, so so the clarity you're asking is actually represents a huge bucket of the contracts currently in place, and you're asking that we allow those to continue forward past January 1st of 2025.
We are not asking the commission to allow month-to-month term contracts that renew to stay in place after January 1st.
Yeah, this seems a
We're
little.
asking the commission to, tell the market what needs to happen with their contracts. And the other thing I'll say is that every supplier's contract language is different, right? So what we're asking the commission to do is to provide direction on what's the commission's view on grandfathering for these contracts, so that suppliers can then look at their language and say, okay, which bucket am I in?
Well,
Make sure I'm getting customers
Okay,
dropped if I need
but
to.
Mr. Wallace, I think what you're asking is for us, in the best of all worlds, you're asking for us to grandfather what could be the majority of existing contracts, which to me would be absolutely contrary to where the legislature was on SB 1.
I think the specific ask that we have, I think, is in our comments is we want to have clarity on the treatment for existing customers served on contracts that include a variable monthly price but do not renew monthly. Those are the folks that we're saying under the grandfathering language in SB 1, are grandfathered as long as those contracts are entered.
And how many contracts are we talking about?
That's that small subset. That's those folks, right? 10%, maybe less, probably less. We are not asking the commission. SB 1 says that if your contract renews after January 1st, you have to comply with the law, right? So we're not arguing in our filing here that month-to-month term contracts that renew in January would be grandfathered under SB 1. But I think it'd be helpful for the commission in the ruling on these grandfathering questions to give a clear, direction to the market about what the expectation is, so that if there are any suppliers that are not part of our coalition, that they, are getting that direction and have time now to get those drops submitted.
Right. This all seems very squishy to me. I mean, other than, fixed-term contracts that have a clear end date, that I understand, but the rest of this feels awfully squishy. And I feel like we're just going to keep coming back here with yet one more request for clarity, if we're not clear that none of these contracts continue past January 1st. But I don't know if others.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, actually, Commissioner Barbie, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, let me try it this way, because I have to confess I'm now thoroughly confused. So let me address this in a different way. Mr. Walls, is that your name, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what percentage of the contracts have explicitly stated end of contract? In other words, what percentage of these contracts say on June 1st, contract ends?
I think based on our discussion, it could be in the neighborhood of 50% of the contracts have a fixed term, right? That say, it's a 12-month contract, it's a 18-month contract, it's a 24-month contract, and then the other bucket is, a monthly, a monthly renewal.
Pardon me for interrupting you. The other bucket are contracts that do not have an explicit end of term, which indicates to me that you're asking us to opine on 50% of the contracts where there is some question as to whether or not SB 1 applies. Am I correct there?
I think, no, the subset of contracts we're asking the commission to address with respect to this perpetual contract issue is a small subset that is far less than 50%.
Okay, so what I think I'm hearing from you is that 50% of the contracts are not NOT, not perpetual, and of the ones that are in some way, perpetual, only a small subset are the ones where you have a question. So describe to me the traits, the characteristics of one of these contracts where it doesn't have an explicit end of term, but for which you don't need clarity. Because that's what I'm not understanding. I'm not understanding if you have a contract that doesn't have an end of that has an expiration date. I don't understand why, in the case of some contract, it's unconfusing and does not require clarification by the commission.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think it does highlight some of the key points here. So, when we're talking about the universe of retail supply contracts for residential customers in Maryland, I think about fixed price, fixed term contracts. Those usually have a renewal provision. I don't consider that to be a perpetual contract because that is going to renew, pursuant to the Commission's regulations in 2053-07-08, 2059-07-08. There's a renewal notice that goes out. Some of those mechanics are changing under SB 1, right? But that is a contract for a fixed term that then renews for a subsequent term, right? So that's, let's call that 50% of the contracts out there, ballpark, right? The other 50% of contracts are contracts that have a monthly variable price, and of those 50%, let's call it, the vast majority have a month-to-month term. So the contract would say something to the effect of, this contract will renew every month until canceled by either party. And then those are the kinds of contracts for which we have language in the regulations that requires the supplier to post their price 12 days in advance so the customer can see what their upcoming price is and make a decision to switch with accelerated switching in advance of that price taking effect. There's this other small subset of contracts that, and we don't consider those month-to-month term contracts to be perpetual either, right? They do continue in perpetuity, but they renew every month, right? So there's this other small subset of contracts that start at a certain date, and the language will say something to the effect of, this contract will continue in perpetuity, or this contract will continue until canceled by either party, without saying that it will be a month-to-month term contract, right? So this is a perpetual contract that is entered into by the customer and the supplier that does not have an end date specified in the contract, but either party may cancel the contract. These are the kinds of perpetual contracts that the Pumphrey Court was looking at when they said, okay, if it's not clear what the end date is, as long as the parties expressly agree that it be a perpetual contract, those can be valid under Maryland law. So it's the small set of contracts where the term does not renew and it continues in perpetuity. We're trying to figure out what to do with those folks. The other buckets, right? If it's renewing every month, I think the grandfathering language in SB 1 accounts for those and says when the contract renews, it needs to comply. And similarly, if you've got a 1-year fixed term contract and that comes up for renewal, when that renewal date hits, that contract needs to comply.
Okay, so let me just summarize here. You want clarity only on those contracts that have variable rate pricing but no fixed end, correct?
That's the subset of contracts that we focused on in this filing. Correct.
I'm sorry, am I correct or not correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I have a question for staff. So we know how many people have retail energy supply contracts, but we don't know how many of them have these types of contracts, right?
I don't, Chair Hoover, but it could be that Kevin Mosier from EAP has that information. And I don't. Oh.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, he says he doesn't.
Oh, so we do know who has the types of contracts that he's talking about, correct?
Kevin Mosier on behalf of staff. The only thing, pardon, the only thing we get is the monthly report from the utilities showing us how many total customers are on choice, but we don't get any information that I'm aware of that says, they're fixed.
Oh, okay. So we don't get it. We just know who has a retail supply contract, but not what kind of contract they have.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So, do you have anything you want to respond to from them apart from what you already said and filed?
Yes, thank you so much. Number one, the statement that the bill 2024's SB 1 did not focus on price structure. I would disagree with that most fervently. Staff's report that was filed on Friday night is all about the section of the bill that requires reports on customer prices paid. And it's a long report, and there's a lot of language in the statute just on that one issue. So staff would most fervently disagree that the bill doesn't focus on pricing structure. Number two, I have a different reading of pump free. I think it cuts toward staff. I could brief the commission on that at a later date. I would urge the commission, I don't think it will be, but not to be distracted by the side issues of drops and other issues. And again, I just wish to restate that I disagree with council that Section 7 and 8, that a presently existing obligation or contract right may not be impaired. Staff's analysis does not do that. And Section 8, that 7510D and 604.2B actually are construed to apply to all agreements entered into or renewed after 1/1/2025, and staff argues that that is the three buckets that we identified: the month-to-month, the auto-renewing, and the indefinite time term. And staff urges the commission, well, I would say staff can't overstate the gravity of determining all three buckets as their impacts for other issues like POR potentially. And thank you.
Okay, I'll give you the last word on this.
Yeah, I think, I think at the end of the day, what we're looking at is the language in Section 7 that says a presently existing contract right will not be impaired in any way by this act. And when you've got, and then it goes on to say when contracts renew, they need to comply. If they're entered into after this date certain of January 1st, they need to comply with the SB1 requirements. And so our view is that, a contract that's in place today is a presently existing contract right. And, the customer has chosen with the supplier to enter into that contract with a perpetual term or an indefinite term, and that, requiring the supplier to cancel that contract and drop that customer would impair the contract right that was established before that date under the act. And again, at the end of the day, we're here to ask for the commission to tell us what we need to do so that we can do it promptly and avoid any compliance issues or mitigate compliance issues as we head into the new year.
Okay, so we're going to take this under advisement for a couple reasons. One, I want to get the input from Commissioner Richard, who's actually talking to our friends at MACO today. But also, given that you're looking for specific directions, I want to issue something written so that you'll know sort of exactly where the lines are and what you need to do. So I guess we're now going to move to issue 2, and you said that's.
Thank you, David
Mr.
Hoppe.
Hoppe, do you want to start off?
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. David Hoppe on behalf of staff. Regarding issue 2, the clarification regarding residential and commercial customers, staff recommends that the Commission reaffirm the existing processes that are explained in tariffs to determine what rate schedule a customer should be served under, and this requires no further action by the Commission. This process requires the utility customer, if they believe they're on the wrong service schedule, to contact the utility and work with the utility in making the determination of what is the correct service schedule. Additionally, staff recommends that the Commission consider a customer to be a residential customer for the purposes of Senate Bill 1 if the customer is served by an electric or gas utility under a residential rate schedule. Thank you.
So, any questions for Mr. Hoppe? So let me go through the same order I did before. So we'll start with OPC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In our comments, we had asked the Commission to seek further information before making a decision on this item. Staff has gathered that information, and so now we support staff's recommendation that the Commission just maintain the existing policy reflected in the utilities tariff for making the determination of whether somebody is a residential versus non-residential customer. And I'll let the utilities speak more on it, but it seems to me that there is a process currently to accomplish what the supplier coalition is seeking to accomplish, to have miscategorized customers categorized correctly. To the extent that they're suggesting that suppliers would make an independent determination that somebody is a residential customer or a commercial customer based on whatever criteria they feel is appropriate, we would object to that.
Okay, joint utilities.
Joel Michelle again on behalf of the joint utilities. Our position on this is consistent with what the commission has heard from OPC and staff. I just reiterate that in addition to the point made that the utilities' tariffs should control whether a customer is residential or non-residential, based on those tariffs, it is the use of the particular facility or property that determines whether they're served under a residential or non-residential rate, and not the name on that particular account. And I think we explained our position on that in detail in our comments, and if the commission has any questions on that, I'm happy to answer.
Commissioner Sussman.
Hello, Mr. Michelle. So I'm trying to understand why, I mean, in Risa's filing, they've kind of listed schools, colleges, churches, mental health facilities, cemeteries. Why would those entities be under a residential rate?
Well, I can provide an example. So let's say, for instance, the University of Maryland has residential facilities or a house that it uses for faculty housing, right? Because that building or that home is used for residential purposes, it would be served under a residential rate with BGE. And again, based on our commission-approved tariffs, that would be appropriate because our tariff indicate that the rate class is determined by the use of the property.
Okay. And churches, is it?
Similarly, churches sometime will have a residential facility connected to the church building, and they.
Although I won't ask about cemeteries because I don't really know who lives at a cemetery. But so it's not. I mean, I from reading this, I had the sense that all of these organizations were served under residential. So it's just it may be a particular use. So that I guess the question is, would that particular home, if somebody were living in a home of a college, they would actually want to be under a commercial contract for purposes of retail electric supply? I guess I'm confused. I mean, why would this be an issue?
I think probably Mr. Wallace is best
that's fine.
suited to
That's
answer
fine.
that question from their
Thank
perspective.
you.
Actually, before you leave, so when you're talking about the college situations, so you're talking about like the president of the college would have a residence on the campus, but you're not talking about like the dorms or
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So all right, that's fine. Maryland Energy Advocates Coalition. You have anything? Okay. All right. Then, Mr. Wallace, go ahead.
Yeah, Eric Wallace again on behalf of the Retail Supplier Coalition. I mean, on this issue, the scenario that we see most often is something where, you know, a commercial entity is entering into a commercial contract with a supplier, and there's often sort of a master agreement and then a list of the accounts that they want to enroll. And so sometimes there is an account or two in that list of accounts they want to enroll. You know, it could be XYZ Business LLC that come back tagged as a residential meter by the utility, right? Whether it's because it's an incidental account to a commercial building, or it used to be a residential facility that's maybe owned and operated by a property management company, or there's a number of different scenarios that we see where this issue comes up. And the concern is, given how significant the penalties are under SB 1 and how prescriptive the requirements are with respect to residential customers, that there's a risk to suppliers serving commercial customers that are, where the customer believes they're a commercial customer, they're signing a commercial customer contract for this account, and the supplier believes that this customer is a commercial entity and doesn't have visibility to say, to know that this particular account or meter needs to be treated differently. And I think that when we look at SB1, the intent is clear that it not be applied to commercial customers. And so this is an instance where, there's sort of this mismatch between, the way that the meter is tagged by the utility and what the customer's expectation is about that being a commercial account that they can include in their list that they're providing to a supplier to enroll. We recognize that there are processes under the tariff to reclassify meters, and that requires the customer to know that their meter has the wrong classification, to go to the utility, to go through the process of redesignating that. Again, we're bumping up on a deadline here in a couple of weeks where we want to make sure that suppliers aren't in compliance. And so one suggestion I would make to resolve this issue is perhaps the commission could decide that there will be a rebuttable presumption that a residential meter is indeed a residential customer. But if a supplier can show a commercial contract where the account is in the name of XYZ LLC, rather than, Joe and John Smith, I think that there ought to be an opportunity for suppliers not to be penalized for serving that customer, but also for, commercial accounts that are in this kind of, meter classification scenario to be able to proceed with shopping for retail choice if that's what they've decided to do. And this is one of many accounts under that customer entity that is a commercial entity.
Okay, Commissioner Barbe.
Yeah, thank you. Since you bring up the issue of a rebuttable presumption, I'm not a lawyer, but reason this through with me. You have a church, and the pastor lives on the premises in his or her, number of rooms, and it's asserted that this is really a residential, functionally a residential contract, but that portion. How precisely would one rebut that?
Yeah, so I think the scenario I would contemplate for that particular scenario is the church would be entering into a contract for retail supply, and they would say, we've got 3 or 4 meters, right? We've got one for the sanctuary, we've got one for this outbuilding, and we also have this residence on our campus that the pastor's living in, right? So we've got these 3 accounts or 4 accounts that we want to enroll with you, retail supplier. So we're going to enter into this agreement that lays out, the pricing and the terms, and we're going to attach a list of the accounts that we want to enroll, and then the supplier would go to enroll those accounts. So that would be where it would be, XYZ Church, a commercial entity, nonprofit charity, but, a commercial entity nonetheless, would be seeking to enroll its account, and we're bumping up against this meter classification issue with respect to one of the accounts.
And forgive me, but this seems like a very small, now this is an example of a very small subset of the commercial account. And I'm failing to understand why this is a gigantic hardship for the people you represent. Maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps you can explain that to me.
Yeah, I think the big concern here is that this happens frequently, and we don't know what these accounts are when they're out there, right? So this is an area where, in the day-to-day business of operating a retail supplier for commercial entities, you can inadvertently find yourself afoul of SB1 if that account is determined to be a retail customer that's prohibited from enrolling on that contract. And so we want to make sure that the commission is aware of this issue, but also that there's an opportunity to resolve those issues on a case-by-case basis as they may come up, without the supplier. Because if the commission says, that that's a residential customer, notwithstanding that it's a commercial entity, it's a residential customer, that makes it very difficult for suppliers to operate, even to serve commercial customers in this market, because of the risk that that these kind of accounts will pop up from time to time, and that could trigger pretty significant penalties under SB1, right? And so that's why I suggest maybe a rebuttable presumption would be appropriate here, so that as these things come up, and I don't think it's the vast majority or even, a huge portion of these, but it's out there as a risk across the board. And so we want to be proactive about it and make sure that, that we're taking the reasonable steps to make sure that we can continue to serve commercial customers moving forward as contemplated by SB1.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sussman?
I don't know that we can do a rebuttable presumption, and I don't know that we can change the accounts so that we treat them as commercial. I mean, this is really a relationship that the customer has with their utility. I understand the concern, and maybe there could be. I guess the question is how does a supplier would never know if the customer were a commercial customer or residential customer in terms of the meter. Is that the case?
I think there are ways that you can find out after the fact, but
well, is there a way that you can find out before?
Practically not well. There is a pre-enrollment option under the rules, but
So
that
so
mechanic doesn't work.
So I have a utility representative right behind you, and maybe he can answer. I just feel like, I mean, to Commissioner Barvey's point, I'm not sure this is a huge issue, but I also don't want to muck up the process for making determinations about who's a residential and who's a commercial customer. That's not for us to do or for you to do. I mean, that's really a. So I'm Mr. Michelle, is there an easy way for a retail electric supplier to know who's residential, who's commercial?
Yeah, I don't think there's any guesswork that's needed for that. The customer knows what rate they are under, and as Mr. Wallace just indicated, they have 3 different meters. And
well, they also have bills, and the bills will tell them. I just don't know that this is I'm not sure that this is an issue, and I'll tell you what I'm really concerned about is then sort of creating a presumption that avoids your members sort of doing the work that they should be doing, which is to they're going to see a commercial customer has multiple meters. That should be an indication that perhaps they could be under, more than just a commercial meter. So I don't want to sort of create a situation where there's a safe harbor for your members that sort of are behaving in ways that are not necessarily responsible. I mean, I'm not sure that there's really an issue here, and then so I'm worried about creating a safe path for your members, where there's sort of an easy way to make a determination about whether somebody is a commercial or a residential customer.
Just to briefly respond, I mean, the concern is one of timing, right? So when the customer is meeting with a retail supplier and looking to enroll their accounts, sitting there, the supplier and the customer may not know that this particular meter is tagged as a residential meter when it's in the name of a commercial entity, right? And so that's the piece, is that it gets in the way of that commercial entity's effort to enroll those accounts, and creates this risk that a supplier can inadvertently run afoul of SB1 when they're taking reasonable steps and checking with customers and trying to enroll commercial customers.
Well, I think at that point if a retail electric supplier discovers that they inadvertently signed up a residential customer for a commercial service, they can just come to us and we can hear what the problem is, and if it was a reasonable effort to determine whether somebody is a residential or commercial customer, we can address that. I'm not seeing first that there's a problem, but I'm also worried about creating a safe harbor where we don't need to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a safe harbor. I think it is a rebuttable presumption that it is a residential.
Well, then it's a safer harbor. But either situation, I'm just worried about sort of creating an opportunity for gaming. That's what I worry about. And so and especially if it's not that much work on the part of your members to determine whether somebody is a residential commercial customer.
I mean, just to be clear, I mean, this is an issue that comes up a lot. That's the reason that we included it in our petition, and it's one that members are very concerned about. It is a very difficult landscape to try to navigate here, and this is one issue where, we think the intent is that commercial customers can continue shopping, and this is one of those discrepancies that comes up that, calls that into question, and so that's the reason that we're seeking the Commission's guidance here in this and ruling on this issue today.
Okay. OPC, you were looking to offer
Just
some.
briefly, this idea of a rebuttable presumption was not included in the Supplier Coalition's letter, so I just wanted to go on the record as saying OPC opposes this suggestion.
So, Mr. Wallace, I mean, part of the genesis for SB1 was the concern with the marketing and soliciting activities that the retail suppliers did vis-a-vis residential customers. I assume, and since there wasn't any complaints from the commercial customers about this added protection, in fact, they said, we don't need it, thanks a lot, I assume there's a different marketing technique that you engage in with those customers?
I mean, typically it's a different process, where there are often, brokers involved that are, connecting commercial customers and their accounts with suppliers, right? And so it's not, I don't think it's like like going door to door or telemarketing or some of the different practices that we've seen in Maryland on the residential side that have led to some of the concerns that drove SB1. I mean, typically these are, a broker is helping a commercial entity connect with a retail supplier, and is, passing along the account information for that contract and helping the customer sign up for that. And it's just, this issue has come up, continues to come up. It's a challenge not just here in Maryland, but in other markets that regulators are still haven't quite figured out the right solution. It's just more of an issue now in Maryland because we have this very clear line that's been drawn by the statute, and this scenario doesn't seem to be the kind of scenario that was contemplated by the General Assembly when they, set up SB1.
But I guess my point is that the two parties involved, the retail supply company representative and the customer representative, have pretty even amount of knowledge on this. I mean, because what was expressed during the bill hearings from the commercial customers is, this is a big piece of the puzzle for us because it's such a large expense, and so we either have a person or some part of our organization that devotes its attention to this to figure out what's the best deal for us. And I guess vis-a-vis your companies, your folks are, expert in trying to explain to the commercial customer why it's advantageous for them to do this, as opposed to, the situation with the retail or the residential customer who, knows a little but probably not much about this, and so therefore, the feeling was that more levels of protection were needed for those customers. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, are we really trying to fix a problem that maybe doesn't really exist? Although I hear your comments about, at least from your clients, that you think you need clarification from us on this. But I guess I'm wondering just how big a deal this is. So.
And the commercial customers that are submitting these accounts believe them to be commercial accounts that are eligible for shopping. So, I think just the big picture issue is, at the end of the day, we want to be able to continue to serve commercial customers like we've been doing. We think that SB1 contemplates that. And this, and we don't want to run afoul of the residential protections and end up in a situation where the very significant penalties under SB1 could be a risk, right? And even if at the end of the day the commission looks at that scenario and says no, I mean, suppliers are trying to decide what they should be doing over the next few weeks and months here, and this is one of those areas of risk that we don't know how it's all going to shake out in the end, and that's why we're asking for the commission to address this issue proactively now.
Okay, so any last words from staff either, or you want to pitch it to him, or?
Yes, thank you. Also, staff was surprised to hear the notion of a rebuttable presumption, and staff urges the commission not to consider that for a variety of reasons. And then the second thing is, I just want to go on record, staff wants to go on record as not agreeing that nothing in SB1 applies to commercial customers, because in our study of this, we don't agree with that. So that's just for the record. And I don't know if Mr. Hoppick has any other comments.
Mr.
As we laid out in our comments, pre-enrollment data to the supplier, provided to the supplier, specifically states the rate class or code. There's bills going out that specifically state for which account are residential, which account is not residential, and then the process needs to be between the customer and the utility. And that is a major point of emphasis. That the customer, for example, if a supplier tells a customer, hey, we don't think this should be a residential rate schedule that this account is served under, it is the customer that goes to the utility, not the supplier. That is the process.
Okay. Well, just like item number 1, we're going to take this under advisement again because I want to get input from Commissioner Richard, and again, since you want specific clarification, we're going to provide that in print. So, so I guess with that, you want to take like a 15-minute break before we move into the remarketing thing?
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to adjourn the administrative meeting and then take up the green marketing situation when we come back. So. Okay, so back on the record, this is actually case 9757, the green marketing proposals. So I guess,
Kevin Mosier of staff. Yeah, our position is rather simple. Based on all the evidence I've seen over the years, it looks like some number, maybe even a large majority of suppliers, basically go out and buy the least expensive RECs available when they want to market to a green product. So for the generic cap, it really should be based on, the trailing 12-month average, because that's consistent with the other cap for the remaining residential suppliers, and the tier 2 rec price. I think the suppliers have argued for 150%. Even if you were arguing for a tier 1, that still allows a large number of suppliers potentially to come in, charge the premium for buying a tier 1 rec, but just pay for a tier 2 rec. And again, for any supplier that wants to come in and show they're buying, tier 1 solar, much more expensive recs, we have a process. They can come in, make that filing, and, if that filing hits my desk, I will try to review it as quickly as possible. But again, the generic one should be based on the fact that some suppliers are going to choose the cheapest option possible.
okay. Any questions? Commissioner Sussman?
Good afternoon. What about national recs?
I'm still not clear if national recs can be, national recs can absolutely not be used for that 51%.
For the 51%, right.
Above that, I'm not clear if they can be used. The national recs, just looking this morning, I saw a wind rec from a Midwest cooperative. They were 50 cents a megawatt hour, so that would be 5/100ths of a cent, I believe, if my math is right, per kilowatt hour. So, again, that basically, if you were buying national wind recs for that remaining 49%, the typical customer, the cost of that is going to be about a quarter every month for a typical customer.
Okay, and then you're looking at the 12-month historical SOS.
Correct.
Okay, and that would be it. And you know that RISA has been asking for 50% of that.
Correct.
Okay, but in the statute, we could always that would be sort of the threshold, and they could ask for up to 150% above that average or that threshold.
Right. In fact, actually, they can ask for more than 150%, and the commission can grant them more than 150% for that individual supplier. But if the SB1, I think, was pretty clear, if the commission allows any individual supplier an amount above 150%, we have to file a report with the legislature basically justifying.
Right, but it's not, once we establish this sort of threshold, it's not that this is the only amount. It's that if they want to go above that, they just have to come to us and justify why they need to go above that.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Actually, Mr. Mosier, can you spell your last name because we actually have a court reporter here for.
Mosier.
Okay. OPC, you have, before I sort of turn to.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. Ryan Chu and Pauline Rices on behalf of Maryland Office of People's Counsel.
Actually, I need you to spell your last name, too.
Last name, first name Ryan, R-Y-A-N, last name H-S-U. So I have a little statement here. So, as we all know, the legislature's main objective with SB1 was to protect residential customers. Our recommendations regarding green power pricing, therefore, consider customer protection first and foremost, and then, as much as possible, enabling legitimate green offers to come to market. Our recommendations are twofold. First, as regards the pricing for the energy portion of the cap, we recommend using a prospective SOS price rather than a retrospective, 12-month trailing average, because we're setting a price cap for a year going forward, and a prospective SOS price would be more representative of actual energy prices for the coming year than a 12-month trailing average past SOS prices would be. Moreover, we already largely have most of the information to know what the future SOS price will be. While the Exelon utilities in their comments have claimed this is a significant burden on the utilities, We would disagree with that. As the Exelon Utilities pointed out, they already calculate a future price to compare, and we don't think it's a significant burden on the utilities to ask them to do essentially the same thing here. We would agree with them that you don't need to try to predict, what the admin charge or the transmission change charge would be going forward, but to at least calculate the future SOS price based on what we know. Secondly, as regards the additional costs for RECs, OPC also recommends the Commission establish a process for determining a prospective REC price for the same logic that we're setting a cap going forward, so we should try to a prospective looking REC price in the cap would be preferable. However, we acknowledge that might be a challenge to determine this by January 1st, so we alternatively support staff's recommendation to use the Tier 2 REC price from the most recent RPS report on an interim basis until a method for determining a prospective REC price could be developed. We also want to highlight that setting the cap at 150% of SOS, as suggested by RISA and AEP, would not be in the best interest of customers. An interim price cap of 150% of the trailing average SOS price would be about 6 cents per kilowatt hour premium on SOS right now. About PEPCO and SMECO currently have 100% green offerings that are about a 2-cent premium. So there's an extra 4 cents in between 150% and SMECO and PEPCO's 100% green offerings. And SMECO and I believe PEPCO's, but I'm not entirely sure on that one. But certainly SMECO's is even using entirely RPS eligible RECs, or at least PJM Tier 1 RECs to get that 100%, and for a 2-cent premium versus what RISA and AEP are asking for, a 6-cent cap. And this is particularly important because in RM 84, the Commission is considering a process for fast tracking automatic approval of any green offers that are underneath the cap. And so we need to be careful not to set the cap too high, so that customers are protected from green power offers that charge premiums way above the cost of energy. RISA and AEP's proposed cap of 150% could result in green offers, being automatically approved, which contain unfairly high markups for green power, particularly if national RECs get involved, which is exactly what the legislature was trying to prevent with SB1. Not the national wind, but the high markups for green power. So OPC's recommendations will help ensure that customers are protected and the cap accurately or more accurately reflects the market price for green power for the coming year. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner Sussman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Shu. So you're proposing that we calculate forward-looking SOS prices.
Correct.
But we don't have all of the pricing.
So we don't have all of it. We have the vast majority of
We
it.
have 75% of it. So we're still missing, well, according to your your comments, the final 25% won't be procured until April.
Yes. Well, it's actually a little less than 25% because so there's a 25. It's like the final 25% of the SOS contracts, but that only covers the last 3 months of the year. So it's really like 25% divided by another quarter. So it's like 12.5%.
But
yeah, there is a portion that.
Right,
yeah.
right. So we have numbers we know, and then numbers we don't know.
Right.
And I'm concerned about trying to predict, especially given what just happened in the last auction, what we have in the PJM auction, so how that could impact SOS going forward, as opposed to what we know.
Right.
And I'm worried about how that could impact ratepayers.
Yeah, we're not suggesting to predict anything at all. We're basically saying to take what we do know and calculate that out, and then essentially use that as.
Yeah, but there's still about 25% that we don't know. So we are.
I think that what our thought is that even though there's a section of it that we don't know, it's going to be more accurate than like the past. Like the past 12 months have very little to do with what the price is going to be going forward. You know,
Well, it
I-
has some, I mean, if we have a major change in residential rates, that's going to be a big problem for us. I mean, presumably what happened last year is going to be sort of reflective of what happens going into next year, because if we have a big bump up in rates, that's going to be a problem for residential customers. I'm mostly trying to understand where OPC sees the value of trying to forecast,
well,
as opposed to having, I mean, historical means we know what those numbers are, and so we have some comfort in knowing this is what SOS prices were.
yeah, I mean, essentially, it boils down to, you know, yeah, we know what the SOS price was in the past, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean anything for what the SOS price is going to be going forward. Whereas we know the vast majority of what the SOS price will be going forward, and that is, you know, even the last, you know, we don't know this last 25% or 12.5% of, you know, the SOS price for 2025. What we do know about that is going to be closer to what it actually ends up being than what the 12-month trailing average is, right? Because the 12-month trailing average has absolutely nothing to do with
Or not, depending on what that last auction.
well, even if the last, you know, even if the last auction is, you know, has a crazy number, which, and also what the capacity auction isn't like 100% reflected in the.
Well, I understand that,
yeah,
but it does make me sort of at least be a little bit cautious about trying to rely on future auctions to try to set. I guess the question is I mean, is this something that OPC thinks is really important, or could you live with especially since this is a new area for us, and you know, we can see how it goes, and if there's a problem, we can always make adjustments, sort of a year from now. I mean, I guess the question, I'm trying to understand how important you think it is to setting it based on future SOS.
We think it's like, we think it's more logical, essentially. Like, again, like even, you know,
But in terms of its impact on,
in terms of its impact on customers, and yeah, it's not like you know, it could go. I think in terms of impact on customers, it's not like, I don't know that it's, you know, like massively important,
Okay.
right? I think it's just more logical. You know, basically doing, even if the last auction, you know, does something crazy, it doesn't impact. It only impacts like 12%. So like the rest of the 80% is locked in. We already know what that is, and so the price would only change by, you know, a little percentage of whatever that last auction is. And we just think that, you know, is more
right,
logical
but
and
given that
be
this is
clearer.
kind of almost a new program, if we sort of base it on what we know now, and then we have a year's worth, and then it looks like we could certainly do, you know, a year going forward as opposed to back. We'll at least have a year's worth of experience in this, and I'm just a little bit concerned about sort of going forward with a number that we don't really know, but we're guessing, and it could be a good guess, but it's not certain.
Yeah, I mean, I think our opinion is that the backward price is more of a guess than the forward price would be, but.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Barve.
Yeah, thank you. I should know the answer to this, and I think I do know the answer to this, but I guess the anecdote to future uncertainty is a reconciliation process. I assume when the actuals get known, there'll be some reconciliation truing up process, or I assume that's the case, right?
I mean, I'm not sure in this instance there would be like when we know the price, we'll know the price. I suppose when we know the price fully in April after I think it's the April SOS auctions, you could modify the cap then based on we definitely know for 2025 this is what the SOS price is, but I don't know about because I mean we're just setting a cap here.
Apparently, I completely misunderstood this process, so forgive me. I guess what we're really saying is that when we know the price, that's when we're going to price it, and not beforehand. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's an option we could do. So I mean, what we're trying to do here is set a cap on green power prices that say as in SB1 it says you have to set a baseline cap price that says retail supplier offering green power has to offer below this, or if they offer above it, then they have to come to the commission and make a request for that specifically. And so we're trying to set that here. Our proposal.
Okay, so forgive me for interrupting you. So basically, even if even if the auctions go horribly wrong, we still have the option to course correct as a commission. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's completely within your power.
Okay, I feel a lot better about it. Thank you.
Okay, actually, let me turn to Exelon Utilities, because they filed a proposal. And if you could not only state your name, but also spell it for the court report.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Hoover and Commissioners. I am Catherine Moriarty, counsel on behalf of Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Catherine, Katharine, Moriarty, Moriarty. And with me today, I also have subject matter expert David Bloom, David Bloom, and he is manager of energy acquisitions of Baltimore Gas and Electric. Thank you. The Exelon Joint Utilities recommend using the trailing 12-month SOS rate to calculate the green product baseline cap because this methodology is transparent and based on actual known values. All suppliers will have the ability to track the 12-month average when they make their green products offers. WGL Energy Services and the Supplier Coalition and staff also recommend using the trailing 12-month SOS average in their recommended green product baseline methodologies. The Exelon Joint Utilities have no recommendations regarding the additor, including the risk premium and locational value and source of the RECs to calculate the green power price cap. And I just want to answer a few points made. This hearing is to decide the baseline cap for green product pricing, and that's decided annually at this hearing. And so in part of that process, there was never a true-up or reconciliation for any estimates or unknown values of the SOS product if we do use OPC's recommendation. And the joint utilities, we have concerns about being responsible for calculating a prospective SOS price that would be based on unknown variables. And what if we projected too high? What if we projected too low? When we actually have actual known numbers that we can recommend and that are used also throughout this statute as a recommended methodology. So again, also for consistency with the price cap for non-green product offers, the Exelon Joint Utilities support using the 12-month trailing SOS average. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Commissioner Fleischman?
Good afternoon, Ms. Moriarty. And maybe this is me opining again, and as opposed to. I mean, if it's an annual calculation, it's very hard to do a true up. I'm assuming Mr. Wallace's members would pull out their hair if they entered into contracts knowing that price may not be the price that we end up with if we do a true up. I can see that, but it also sort of goes to my earlier point about the fact that this is new. We'll sort of we can sort of agree on a price now, approve the price, and then see how it plays out over the year. Come back at the end of next year with a year's worth of experience, and then look to see whether it made sense to do forward-looking or backward-looking, and what that means. And then, of course, your point about the fact that it is that we're merely setting this cap that can be exceeded if one of RISA's members comes to us and says this is the product that we would like to offer. It is up to 150% above what the threshold amount is, and this is why we're asking for it. So we're not putting any restrictions on their ability to come forward to us with an alternative.
Right. There wouldn't be any restrictions on alternative higher prices than this.
Right, and if we did some kind of true-up from the utilities perspective, what that would involve.
We don't recommend doing a true-up.
Yeah.
We don't want to do a true-up. We'd have to do a true-up on, we don't want to use unknown numbers. We want to use known actuals.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing nobody else. So what about WGL Energy? All right.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Janique Williams. That's Janique. Last name is Williams, Williams. WGL opposes staff's recommendation of using the Tier 2 price in the annual RPS report. We believe that those numbers are skewed and is not reflective of the market today. Additionally, compliance recs, some of those may be vintage, which may skew the price because recs do last 3 years. So if a supplier were to use 2022 recs, it would be cheaper than the current year. Additionally, we do have some concerns with SB1 and some inconsistencies as where the source of the green power. There is a 51% requirement that should satisfy Maryland RPS standards, and then the 49% we assume could be from elsewhere. However, later in SB1, it does state that the REC should be retired in PJM GATS, and it should be in a reserve subaccount that the commissioners can check. And therefore, that would assume that the RECs would have to be generated domestically in Maryland.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Sushman?
Good afternoon. So actually, I did have a question about the RECs, and so it is. Is it your understanding? I mean, you see an inconsistency in SB1, but I guess from the company's perspective, do you for the 49%, do you see that a product could be offered that includes RECs from places other than PJM, or do you think it's restricted to just PJM RECs?
So the 49%, we do believe that it could be national RECs.
Okay, so the 51% would have to be
PJM.
and then the other 49% could be national.
Correct.
Okay, and then what about the establishment of the cap in terms of sort of forward or historical? Do you have a position on that?
So we believe that, like OPC, in regards to the REC component, that it should be forward-looking because we are purchasing it to, come 2025. So therefore, using 2023 numbers would not accurately reflect the market. I believe that it's about, for Tier 2 RECs, it's about 10 cents that was in staff's proposal. However, the market now is about 15 cents. So there's a huge discrepancy, even just looking at Tier 2 RECs.
Okay, but in terms of the SOS price?
The SOS price, we do agree with the utility that it, because of everything.
So that one should be historical?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Now, is there anybody else who had thoughts on this before we turn to the retail suppliers? Energy Advocates Coalition?
Thank you, Laurel Peltier, Energy Advocates. I
Actually,
want.
I need you to spell your last name.
Oh, excuse me.
Sure.
P as in Paul, Eltier. I appreciate the time and investment on this because this is a super important product. Because if you look at New York, that did quite a bit of revisions on their market. Many suppliers merged into the green power area because they didn't have any price caps set. And so if you look at New York's results right now, they're basically 50% suppliers. They're 50% green, and they do have some RECs, but they still have very high prices. So I think it's obvious that if you were a business person, you would go where you could make money. And if indeed the 49% are national RECs, these are voluntary, unbundled national RECs. They're purchased on the voluntary market. It is a big market, and it also includes a lot of things that aren't wind. There's hydro in there. There's methane capture. There's even effects now for, and they will have to disclose that. But the prices can be very low, and the average account in Maryland is buying about 6 RECs right now. So if there's a big premium baked in, and there's still an opportunity to purchase very inexpensive RECs. And the way I know this is I've done a lot of calling of the companies and looking in the contracts, and sure enough, buried in there it'll say it could be wind or it could be hydro. And I see hydro in a lot of these because that's still renewable. So we would recommend for the first year supporting what staff said, because there is an opportunity, especially I do know some of these offers, they are pretty good. They are buying PJM RECs, and they have the opportunity to come in and show here's the type of RECs we're buying, and here's what the current market is. And the market's I agree, is very, very hard to put your finger on it because it's not like this open market. So I wanted to just to share that from an advocate's point of view and a consumer point of view, extremely important to get this right. So thank you.
From WGL's Energy's perspective, we do feel like the market, what customers require, it's not tier 2 RECs, it's mostly wind and solar, and WGL only procures Green E certified wind. We don't even do hydro. Therefore, we would be at a disadvantage if the tier 2 REC prices were used.
I see. Okay. All right. So let me turn to, unless, do you have something that we...
I guess just one quick comment on WGL's. Yeah, WGL is correct. They are one of, I believe, 2 suppliers in the entire Maryland market that are Green E certified. And the Green E certified, I'm not sure exactly what all additional qualifications, but you do have to meet some additional qualifications to be Green E certified. So from WGL's standpoint, I think their arguments are fair. The problem, of course, being WGL is setting a standard for themselves that a lot of other suppliers won't. So if you set the standard based on the product WGL is providing, it probably should be higher, but then I think you're leaving a gap for all these other suppliers that it appears go out and buy the cheapest possible wind RECs, to basically kind of game the system. And again, for WGL, if they file their own specific filing showing their costs are higher, staff will review that as soon as possible and get a response out as quickly as possible.
Okay. So.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. Eric Wallace with the Supplier Coalition. In our comments, I think the key thing we're thinking about is that we're looking at setting suppliers are going to be procuring RECs and energy and capacity and ancillary services in the market that is coming up in the future, right? We are prospectively procuring for products that have yet to be developed because we don't know what the landscape is going to be under SB1 and particularly with green power products, right? So, in SB1, there's a cap that's tied to a historical price. But I think that the language in 707 that talks about the commission establishing the market-wide price cap, contemplates that the commission is looking at applicable market data for the market in which these offerings will be made. And we're not procuring energy and capacity in, 2-year laddered contracts under an SOS procurement model. And we can't do that. So, I think what we have requested the commission do in this proceeding is to use the threshold that the General Assembly put in here of 150% of the trailing average SOS price as an interim placeholder while the commission looks at these factors in detail. And there's some threshold issues that I think need to be resolved before we can really get into the details of the applicable market data, right? So one of them is, are we going to be looking at national RECs versus exclusively PJM RECs, and then within the PJM REC segment, is that going to include Tier 2 versus Tier 1? And what we've suggested is that, to have, a pricing structure adopted by the Commission that recognizes, things like where the electricity was generated, the amount of electricity that's eligible for inclusion in the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard. Those are factors that the General Assembly put into SB1, and that contemplates that we're looking at, okay, is this going to be a Tier 2 product? Is it going to be a Tier 1 product? And so as a starting point to, get the ball rolling so that suppliers can go back and get something available for Marylanders as we head into the new year, we recommended and requested that the Commission start with a price that is based on the cap in the statute, and then let's look at prospective market data. And this is a temporary transitional kind of moment, and then going forward each year when we come back, we'll be looking at we want to be looking at what is the prospective data that we have for the next year in terms of energy costs, in terms of the REC costs and other applicable market data. And I'm hearing similar things in terms of the Tier 2 REC price, that it's in the $14 to $15 range currently versus the historic $10 range. So if the Commission proceeds with a below market energy component based on historic SOS rates in an environment where those costs are rising in the wholesale market, and also uses a below market historic Tier 2 REC price that doesn't match what suppliers are going to be facing when they're procuring RECs for green power products, I mean, the result is going to be that we're not going to have any green power products available under this cap. And so each supplier will have to individually come in with their own petition for their individual product and get those approved one by one, which is a higher administrative burden for the Commission. It's also, that means that suppliers will have to develop products not knowing whether or not they'll be approved. And so the uncertainty there means that, it sort of undermines competition and the ability for suppliers to, kind of get to work developing these products and have a clear runway to be able to deliver those to Marylanders. And at the end of the day, customers are the ones that are going to be deciding whether or not to enroll in a product, right? So the disclosures that we're developing in the RM84 proceeding, I think talk about you describing where the RECs are coming from so that customers are in a position to say, I really want a solar and wind product, or I'm happy with whatever the cheapest thing on the market is, if that's national wind RECs. Some customers may look at that and go, we see climate change as a national issue and we're happy with national wind RECs. Others may say, we're really wanting to support wind and solar here in Maryland and PJM and prefer that product. So at the end of the day, what the Supplier Coalition is asking is that the Commission use the cap that the General Assembly selected at 150% of the trailing average SOS price, recognizing that that is based on a historic price that is not necessarily going to be reflective of what the market looks like, but it's the best we've got for right now. And then let's, let's finalize some of the components of SB1. I mean, a big one for suppliers is they don't know how they're going to be able to bill their customers, right? And so we don't know if we're going to have to do dual billing or if the Commission is going to require the utilities to provide a UCB solution different than POR, or extend POR on an interim basis until the utilities can develop and implement an alternative UCB option. But I mean, that's a big cost driver that suppliers are going to have to factor into, the cost that they're recovering through the prices they charge. So sitting here today, that's one of many reasons that, using an interim, kind of statutory based price to give us some ability to start, developing these products while we, sort out some of the other outstanding issues is helpful. And then we can come back and say, okay, here's the specific market data that we think applies here based on the market structure the Commission has adopted through the ARM 84 regulations, based on, the cost to serve customers in Maryland. And then going forward, this annual proceeding would look at sort of updating that framework with new data. But, the initial proceeding, going into next year would be looking at setting up that framework initially.
So, any questions, Commissioner Sussman?
Mr. Wallace. So let's walk through 707. I'm assuming you have it with you. Okay. So can you show me in the statute where the legislature set the price at 150% of the SOS?
Well, they didn't set the price at 150% of the SOS. They set the ceiling for the price.
Okay, so where is that? Because I read ceiling as maximum price. That's a price. That's a maximum. That I think is where the ceiling is.
Yep.
So I'm not sure where you're seeing 150% of the maximum price as the ceiling.
It says a price approved by the Commission under this subsection may not exceed 150% of the maximum price.
Okay, so where's the ceiling? Is the ceiling the maximum price, or is the ceiling 150% of the maximum price?
The ceiling for the green power price approved in this proceeding is 150% of the trailing average.
No, that's not how I read it.
Okay.
I read it as the ceiling is the maximum price, because it's a price approved by the Commission may not exceed 150. So this comes into play when your members come to us and say that they would like a price that's different than the maximum price, which I read as the ceiling price. And then if it exceeds 150%, then we have to report that to the General Assembly. I'm seeing the ceiling as the maximum price, because otherwise why would you call it a maximum price? Usually maximum is you can't go above it. That's the ceiling.
Right.
So this legislation is asking for us to set the maximum price. You're asking us to set the maximum price at 150% of what we're setting the maximum price at, which would then mean that once we look at this provision, then it could go 150% above the 150% above the maximum price.
And the way that I'm reading the 150% provision is it's saying when the Commission is establishing the annual price for the market,
right,
that can't go above the trailing average 12-month SOS price. And that's what we're proposing in our proposal here as the interim price cap.
But that means that your members can never come to us and ask for a price. Once that you're saying that they can.
If they have a market-based evidence that their price needs to be above that 150%.
So then we would be going up to 150%. So then we'd be going 150% above the 150%. I think you're misreading this provision. I think this provision, as I read it, and maybe you can tell me that I'm wrong, which is fine. My kids tell me that all the time. I read this as requiring that we set a maximum price, whatever that maximum price is, and that then your members can come to us and ask for a number that cannot exceed 150% of that maximum price. but that if it does, we have to report that to the legislature. That's how I read this provision. Tell me how you would read the provision. Because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense that we're setting a maximum price and it would be in another section of the statute. It would all just be together as one. But the way I read it is because it's in a different provision of the statute, we set the maximum price. That is what it is. Your members can come in and say, we'd like to be able to charge 120% or 130% above the maximum price. Or we'd like to charge 150% or 160%, and if we approve that, we'd have to report that to the General Assembly.
I mean, I think the disconnect is that as I'm reading the 150% provision, it's cross-referencing 7510D, which is the 12-month trailing average SOS price.
Right. That's the maximum price.
Right.
And that's when one of your members can come to us. But what you are suggesting is that we set the maximum price at 150% of the SOS, and then your members can come in and ask for up to 150% of that number.
I think that our members can come in and ask for something. I don't know that there's another 150% cap on top of that. I mean, as I'm reading it, that our members can come in and ask for a price above that cap that's tied to 150% of the trailing average SOS price, but that, we'll need to get approval for that, and the commission has additional reporting tied to any price that exceeds that 150% of the SOS cap.
Well, that's not how I read it. Because otherwise it doesn't make any sense to me. That it would just be in a different part of the statute.
Because in 4.2, right, when it talks about within 120 days after approving a price that exceeds 150% of the maximum price that's authorized under 510D2, and that's when the commission has this heightened reporting requirement.
Right. And that's what we're doing here.
We're asking you not to exceed that cap.
No, this tells us that we have to set a maximum price.
Right.
So that is the ceiling.
Right.
Once we set the ceiling, then, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. You can have a maximum price and 150% above the maximum price. That doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense to me when you have a maximum price and then your members come in and ask to go above that.
So I think the disconnect is there's two maximum prices. There's the maximum price under 7510D, which is the trailing average SOS price, which applies to non-green products, right? And then there's the maximum price under 707 for green power, which is 150% of the brown power maximum price.
And that is not how I read it.
Okay.
If I may,
Please.
Harrison Scher on behalf of staff, SCHERR. PUA 707 D4I states a price approved by the commission under this subsection may not exceed 150% of the maximum price per megawatt hour that is authorized under 7510 D2I of the subtitle, unless the commission determines that the actual cost of a green power exceeds that amount. How I read that is that the price may not exceed 150% of the trailing 12-month average.
So one of your clients comes in and wants to go above that, then they would go under 4.2 little I? Is that what you're saying?
So we would do the individualized request under 3.
Right. That's what that's where I get confused, because that is 3 starts the individualized request. And so 2 sets the price, the maximum price. Why wouldn't, if the legislature wanted us to do maximum plus 150%, why wouldn't they put that in 2?
If I may, Commissioners Reinschue from OPC again, I think what's going on here in that is you have 7510 D2I, right? So that's for brown power is, capped at it, is 12-month trailing average of SOS. So you have one cap there, and then you have the second green power cap from 77073, 2. You have a second green power cap somewhere above that.
So two little I's for brown power?
Well,
Because it says green power.
no. So two little I, two little I's for green power.
Right.
But for the whatever in 510 D2I, that's for brown power. So I think what we have here is there's a brown power cap at 12-month trailing average SOS, right? We have a green power cap somewhere above that, to be determined by the commission, is basically what the topic of this is, and then and then you have those two caps, and then so if a green retail supplier wants to offer a green power above the green power cap, wherever that is, they have to apply directly to the commission. So that's 3, it's the 707D3 here, right? And then where 4 comes in is if the commission approves something that's 150% above the brown power SOS, they have basically what 4I, I think what 4I and 4I2 are saying is if the commission approves something that's 150% above SOS, the brown power offer,
Okay.
then you have to go to the legislature and show them why.
Okay, so you're saying that 4 only applies to brown power?
No, 4 applies to green power offers.
No, but it relates to the 150%.
But the 150% is based off the brown power price. I think what it's saying is essentially if the commission approves a green power offer that's 150% above, the trailing SOS 12-month average, you have to tell the legislature why we're doing that, essentially.
Okay. All right. So then, Mr. Wallace, where is so are you saying to us that we have no limits in what we can, it could be 150%? You're suggesting 150% because you don't want us to go to the legislature and explain why we've gone above 150%? Is that what you're
We're suggesting that because that's the target they put in this statute to say, there's a range of potential reasonable green power prices between 100% of the trailing average SOS price and 150%. And if you go over that, we're going to have some heightened, and the commission can set any price it wants in between there, whether that is for the market-wide price or for an individual supplier's price. And if we're going over 150%, then, there's a heightened review standard that applies to those projects or to those products. So on behalf of my clients, what we're saying is within that range, because there's still so many uncertain things about SB1, because we don't have the forecasted energy and rec market data for the particular products that are going to be, available here, given that we don't have the rulemaking done and there's outstanding things. We want to create an opportunity for a market by using 150% of the trailing average SOS price, which may still be too low.
Oh, okay. So this, and thank you for clarifying this. This is helpful. Then I guess my question, because I misunderstood this, I should have spent more time on it. So I guess my question then is for the product that we approve, the price, whatever that price is. If one of your members decides that they cannot offer a product that meets that cap, they need to go above that cap, what happens then?
Yeah, so let's say that one of our, whatever you pick here, if one of our clients wants to offer a Maryland solar product or a Maryland geothermal product, right, and that's what their customers want, they're not going to be able to get under that price cap, so they could come to the commission on an individualized basis and say, Commission, we want to offer this particular product. Here's how we're going to describe it. The various kind of disclosures and requirements that we're talking about in the RM84 rulemaking. They would come in and say, can you approve this specific offer, right? But let's say that they had another offer that was a combination of RECs, and that could come in under the commission's market-wide cap that's set in this proceeding, then as long as they're an approved green power provider and have gone through that licensing process that we're in the process of establishing, they could offer that product without individualized approval from the commission.
Okay, but where in this statute are we authorized to go above the 150% other than under 4(2)i? I mean, where is there a situation where we don't have to go to the legislature and let them know that we've done this?
Anything above 150% of the trailing average SOS price would be subject to that heightened reporting requirement.
So if we followed your request of 150% above the SOS,
right,
and your client comes in and asks us for a different price for their product, that's going to be above that 150% above, that according to this, we would have to go to the legislature and let them know that we've approved these particular products.
Yeah.
That would be any time.
Yeah, and then they might take a look at that and think about adjusting the threshold, right? If it turns out that Marylanders really want, those Maryland rec products or geothermal products, and we keep bumping into a situation where the commission is having to piecemeal approve those, it looks like the General Assembly wants to be notified so they can take a look at that.
Okay, but if we were to keep it at the SOS price, historical SOS price, then you still have that 150% that can avoid us having to go to the General Assembly with every single project that comes in, where you come and ask for 110% above or 120% above, up to 150% above.
Yeah, so if the commission, if the commission sets the market-wide cap at what staff is proposing, then my understanding from my clients is every product will need to come in and get individualized approval.
Okay.
If I may, so not every product would come in would have to come in for, well, they think they would have to come in for individualized approval, but that's not going to the legislature. The one thing we want to clarify.
No, up to 150%.
Right, 150%.
Right.
Right. So basically, the idea is you have, an SOS, brown power, cap, right? You have a green power cap, and then somewhere slightly above that. But then if it's 150%, our reading is that basically, if you're approving an offer that's 150% above SOS, you have to go to the legislature, and I think that's fire alarm, red alert, tell us what's going on, why you're approving.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm concerned about too. So
setting the cap at 150.
Right. So if we agree with your 150%, we have no wiggle room, and your members have no wiggle room. I mean, if they start then appearing before us, we'd have to deny every one of their requests if we don't want to go to the General Assembly with a red alert.
I mean, I wouldn't characterize it as a red alert. It's a reporting mechanism.
Well, I actually don't know what that is. I mean, if we have to go to the General Assembly every time somebody comes to us.
Well, it's not every time. It's there's ongoing reporting to the General Assembly, like the Commission does with its RPS reports and the various other annual reports the Commission does, to let the General Assembly know that pricing is coming in above the statutory cap of 150% that they put in as the no reporting required, or
Okay.
no special.
So if we keep it at the SOS price, you're saying that none of your members can offer a product.
That's my understanding, because the actual rec prices are higher than they were historically, right? Instead of $10, even the tier 2 are in the $14 to $15 range, and you heard the same from WGL Energy. And then the historic SOS procurements that make up the current trailing average SOS prices are not reflective of what the market in 2025 for a supplier that's procuring energy.
Okay,
and
so I guess my question to you is, what do they need to be able to participate in the market if it's not 150% above SOS?
I think at the end of the day, our expectation is that it'll be somewhere between 100 and 150%, but we can't pick a number now because we don't know how we're going to bill customers, what.
Yeah, well,
what products will be available,
but we have to pick a number.
Right.
So if we have to pick a number, how about if we start with you picking a number?
Well, our number is 150% of the.
Okay,
trailing
but if it's
SOS.
not 150%, what should the number be in order to be able to participate in the market?
I don't have a magic number for you. Somewhere in between, I think the commission will need to pick. I think we did hear that the utilities that are offered, SMECO's green power product is in the 2 to 2.5 cents above, range, right? And so staff's proposal is like a little over half a cent for the green power component, on top of the trailing average SOS price. So, I think somewhere in that, north of that would be reasonable. But at the end of the day, I don't know whether my supplier clients will be able to develop that product until we know what some of these other answers are. But, maybe the commission splits the difference and goes with something in the
So
125% range.
So you're not going to give me a number?
I don't have a number to give you.
Well,
other than 100.
and someone has to. We have to do a number then, unless maybe staff. You looks like you wanted to.
Oh, no.
Okay, but maybe WGL has a number.
So we've done our analysis of the market, and we did come up with the trailing 12-month SOS, I think, plus 20 per rec, and that would be about 125% based on the analysis that we've done.
Okay. Can you share that analysis with us?
At a later date,
If you could go back and find, that would be helpful to see.
I guess one quick point I would make. Yeah, staff doesn't object to using the new Tier 2 numbers, the $15. That may be reasonable. One of the reasons I picked the historical RPS filing is that's the one place I know, and that's the one place I can go and find that's the most recent Tier 2 recs I can find. For instance, if you were looking for SREC prices, you can go to SREC Trade, and they have every day the current price of recs. Tier 1 precs, it's really difficult to find. I don't think I've ever seen any place online that, at least that I have access to, that shows the current market price for Tier 2. So if the supplier coalition has a place where I can go and see, okay, here's the current price for Tier 2, I have no problems changing my calculations quickly and updating those for the current market price. But again, that is specifically why I chose the historic. That's the one place I can go for hard data that I can find that shows a Tier 2 price.
For WGL, we use the Intercontinent Exchange, which is like a hub for recs, and we also have like daily rec sheets. But if you were to use the Intercontinent Exchange, you could find the cost.
Ryan Schieffer, OPC again. I think the main, again, we sort of would prefer a prospective rec price just sort of on the same logical basis to, be more accurate to the market. I think we agree with, staff's use of the Tier 2 rec price in the interim, though, because I think the one thing we want to be careful of is particularly if, as, we allow, if for the other 49% that aren't the 51%, PJM recs, if, national wind recs are allowed for that, which I think our statutory interpretation is I think they might be. Our concern is, as staff has indicated, there could be some really, really cheap, 50 cents a rec, really, really cheap rec. So if you set, a cap based on, Tier 1 PJM recs, at, let's say 2 cents, but the 51, that 49% is using 50-cent RECs, which is, on a kilowatt hour basis, point 0.0000005 of a cent, or something like, basically there's a big gap there for profiteering essentially. So I think we're just cautious of that.
I guess the question is there, if we did sort of forward-looking recs, is there a place where staff feels comfortable in the calculation?
Again, if WGL, if you could send me a link to that, I'd certainly be happy to use that.
Okay.
Again, it's, I use the historic rate for one simple reason. That's the only place I've been able to find a tier 2 price. Again, it's extremely easy to find SREC prices for whatever reason. I've never had any luck finding tier 2 prices. But again, if there's something that I can access, I'd be happy to update my numbers to account for that.
Okay. Any other questions for any of the folks? Okay, seeing none. Let me ask, maybe it's for Mr. Wallace. I mean, you were concerned about timing of these things, so what's the time sensitivity of this one?
Well, I think the concern is the transition that's happening over the next few weeks, right? So effective January 1st, suppliers will not be able to offer their legacy green power products. And there are some customers that are coming up on renewal for their green power contracts. And so right now, suppliers have no idea whether they'll be able to renew those contracts or whether they'll be able to market any green power products in Maryland until we get some certainty on some of these outstanding issues. So I think the urgency is and one of the other challenges is also we have the RM84 proceeding where we have to continue through the rulemaking process and get those regulations in place so that the suppliers can come in and get approved. So it's looking like at this point that won't be ready by January 1st anyways, but it's just there's a lot of moving pieces here for retail suppliers that we're trying to navigate. So if we can at least get some confirmation about where the pricing will be, then we can work towards coming in and getting those applications together. And maybe the commission would allow suppliers to apply even while those regulations are pending, so that they can start to get offers together. I mean, otherwise, if that rulemaking stretches until March or April, then there's likely all those contracts that renew between now and then, those customers would lose their green power supply option. So those are some of the considerations that we're
Yes, Harrison, Chair on behalf of staff. I think there's still the fundamental question that needs to be answered as far as what would qualify as green power for that remaining 49%. And 7-707E2 states that this green power must be a renewable energy credit that an electricity supplier purchases under, well, basically retired in a PGM environmental subaccount that can be accessible by the commission. And it's staff's understanding that a national REC can't be retired in such an account. So thus, it would be inferred that only Maryland certified RECs can qualify as green power.
So do we need to answer that? This is, I think, a really complicated question. And I'm wondering if it's possible to just answer the question about the 51% without getting into the 49%. Because my sense is, so counsel for WGL, I believe, raised the concern about perhaps some inconsistency within SB1 about whether you can go national or not. I don't know that. I mean, just from reading the filings, I'm not sure that there's enough information to be able to make a determination about how to deal with the rest of the 49%. I mean, I don't know. Mr. Wallace?
Yeah, I think what I think back to is our discussion during the RM84 rulemaking hearing on this issue. And the tension is that the statute says that green power products need to be at least 51%, PJM recs, right? So that necessarily means that 49% don't have to be. And then you have this related provision on rec retirement that says, renewable energy credits need to be retired in this PJM GATS account, which applies to PJM recs. And so I think the way that we were interpreting that, and I think where the discussion went during the RM84 rulemaking hearing was that for the recs that are procured and retired for the 51%, those are the recs that logically need to be retired in the PJM reserve subaccount. If you do 100% PJM rec product, well, then all of those recs need to be retired in that PJM reserve subaccount. But if you are doing 51% PJM and 49% something else, then we'd have to come up with an alternative structure to be able to report on that to the commission. And I think we talked about how there are some other, there are a number of different registration platforms.
Right, but the question is, do we have to address that? I think that's going to require a different proceeding. I mean, I guess the question is, can we set the price, the maximum price, without addressing the question about what happens with the other 49%?
I think the challenge for suppliers is if they don't know the answer to that question, they won't know whether the price that they're trying to, the product they may be looking to develop underneath that price that the commission establishes will be acceptable by the commission. Right? So I think the two do kind of go hand in hand. What we wouldn't want to do is for the commission to set a price, a supplier to go out and develop that product, and then not be able to use it because it includes a national rec component.
For something other than the 51%.
For that 49%. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any last thoughts from staff? Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, so it sounds like everybody wants us to address that second piece as well. I don't know that we have enough information in the filings to be able to address. I mean, I think that it may require a legal analysis.
I would probably agree with that. I don't think you need to answer that question to set a cap. It's sort of like a related question to the cap. Like if you're thinking that only PJM recs are going to be allowed, then that sort of might change your thinking on what the cap is versus if national wind recs are allowed, right? But I think you could set a cap anyway without answering the question.
I don't think for the 51%. I don't think
that's not a question.
Right. So, but we're not setting a cap for the other 49%.
Well,
I didn't have that sense.
No, the cap is for any green power offer. So,
but does green power offer mean 100% green power offer?
It could be, it could be that, or it could be less. Basically, the cap we're setting, right, is for any green power offer whatsoever, whether it's 100%, 75%, just the 51%, whatever green power offer would be under this cap, and then if it's not, you have to apply to the commission, yada, yada, yada.
Okay,
but,
so I guess that is the question, is green power offer the 51%, or is green power offer any green power offer?
I believe it's any offer.
51% is the bare minimum to be considered green power.
Yeah. Like the cap, I mean, I suppose theoretically you could set multiple caps, which could be complicated, but I think what the law requires is that, only under law, only 51% PJM recs, qualifies as a green power offer, and then you could offer something, the over 49%, you could do brown power, and that would be a green power offer, or you could do all whatever, something else, some other rec.
But what you're saying is whatever
all of those.
Right, but what you're saying then is whatever you're offering as green power has to satisfy the maximum cap and whatever we're requiring in terms of recs. So we're going to have to answer the question about what do you do beyond the 51%. So if you're offering 75% green power, then it's the 24% that you need to answer. Can they be, do they have to be PJM, or can they be national RECs?
I do think that question needs to be answered at some point, yeah.
But does it have to be answered, Mr. Wallace, you think it does have to be answered in the context of this?
I think it needs to either be answered in this proceeding, like, soon, or in a related proceeding very soon, because they're part and parcel to what does the product look like.
I think what I'm suggesting is if you require us to answer that question, it's probably going to take longer for us to be able to answer that question, all questions. So what are you asking?
I mean, at the end of the day, Commissioner Suchman, we need an answer on that question to move forward.
No, so my question to you is, do you need an answer to both questions? The question about the maximum cap and what RECs can qualify above the 51%. Do you need both of those answered?
We do need both of those answers.
Okay, do you need them answered at the same time?
They both need to be answered before we can develop green power products.
Okay.
And so,
Do you-
yes, our preference is that the commission answer them at the same time so that we can understand what the product composition can be and then develop product pricing that is consistent with the pricing requirements.
Okay.
I might not be understanding.
Well, I don't know that we have enough arguments from the parties about the question about whether national RECs, for example, qualify for that, anything above 51%. So it may be, and we'll have to talk amongst ourselves, but we may actually need briefs from parties on that legal question. That will slow down the process for answering the question about the maximum cap.
Perhaps in the meantime, if I may, we could offer a cap for just the 51% portion that's not in question.
That's kind of what I was asking before.
And what we had proposed in our comments was that, I think the statute contemplates that there are going to be different types of green power products. It talks about percentages and sources and so forth. And so, our position is that the best path forward is to set the green power price in this proceeding for the market at an interim 150% of the trailing average SOS. And then as some of these questions get answered, that we would come back and dig into these statutory factors and be able to provide a more precise green power.
Okay, so Mr. Wallace,
Yeah.
if we just answered the question about what the maximum cap should be, and put off the question about what RECs can qualify for anything above 51% to another proceeding, will that get this process moving in a way that your members will be able to start to put together products? Or do you need both of those answered at the same time, recognizing that that's going to delay this?
It depends on what the commission's price is, right? If the commission sets 150% of the trailing average SOS, we can work with that under either structure, right? If it's, if the price is significantly lower than that, then the options will be more limited on the supply side. And at the end of the day, Commissioner, I understand your question. I mean, there's a lot of variables that my clients are considering here as they're looking at putting these products together. And so both of those are key components. How they're going to be able to build their customers is a key component. How they're going to be able to market to their customers and get licensed by the commission under the ARM 84 regulations. All of those things are things that my clients are looking at as they're trying to chart a path forward here. So I think, if there's sufficient headroom in the price that the commission sets, that we can answer that question later, I think my clients will do the best they can to start to develop products. But the two are very closely tied. So I don't want to tell you that we can march forward without an answer to the other piece, because I don't know that we can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have anything pressing that they feel we need to know?
I think from WGL's Energy's perspective, in looking at the market, we did assume that it was 51 versus 49% in the price that we had suggested. If it were to be, let's say, completely PJM RECs, then it might be 135% because PJM RECs are more expensive. And additionally, if we had only set the cap for that 51%, what would the regulation be for the 49%? Let's say a client wants national wind RECs. How would that work?
Okay. Anything else from staff? Okay. All right. So again, we're gonna, put this on the to-do list. I think what people have to understand though is, SB1 was the first significant change in this process since 1999. And if I remember right, when we constructed this process back in 1999, or I guess in 2000, these things didn't happen, overnight. So I think everybody's going to have to be a little patient as we sort of work through this process, and we will get the answers out, as soon as possible. But it may require further information if we need more data before we can make a decision on this. So with that, we're going to adjourn this, and then actually I think we're going to take a lunch break. So we're going to come back at 2 o'clock to deal with the RM87 rulemaking.